Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Nightmare Narratives. I can picture some of you already in bed, maybe some of you just getting home from work. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, I'm glad you're here. If this helps you relax or sleep, please like and subscribe. It means a lot. Now let's get you comfortable, and I'll tell you tonight's story. My name is Vincent Hawthorne, but everyone calls me Vince. I've been a ranger in Olympic National Forest for 13 years now, and I thought I'd seen everything these woods could throw at me. Bears, lost hikers, winter storms that could kill you in minutes. None of it fazed me anymore. After Korea, not much did. October 1973 was supposed to be quiet. The summer crowds had gone home, and we only had a few serious hikers left braving the early rain season. I was working the radio that morning, same as always, when the call came in about Marcus Reed. "Missing person report," Sally's voice crackled through the speaker. "Nature photographer, been camping near Mirror Lake for 3 days. Friend in Seattle expected him back yesterday." I grabbed my gear and headed out. The fog was thick that morning, rolling through the trees like smoke. My leg ached. It always did when the weather turned cold. That old Korean shrapnel had a way of reminding me it was still there. Reed's campsite looked wrong the moment I saw it. Everything was too neat, too perfect. His tent was zipped up tight, sleeping bag laid out like he'd just made it. Coffee pot sat on the camp stove, still warm, but his boots were gone, and so was his camera. I found the camera first, hanging from a tree branch about 20 feet into the woods. The film was still in it. When I developed it later, the last few shots made my blood run cold. They showed Reed's own face, but taken from angles that should have been impossible, like someone else was holding the camera, taking pictures of him while he wasn't looking. The last photo showed him staring straight at the camera with an expression I'd never seen before. Pure terror. I called it in and started following the trail. Reed's boot prints were clear in the soft earth, heading deeper into the forest. But something bothered me about them. They were too perfect, too evenly spaced, like someone walking very carefully, thinking about each step. About a mile from camp, I found his jacket. It was hanging from a branch 12 feet off the ground. No way a man could have reached that high, and there were no other branches he could have climbed. But there it was, swaying in the breeze, like someone had just put it there. That's when I heard him calling. "Help me!" Reed's voice echoed through the trees. "Please, someone help me." I grabbed my radio. "This is Ranger Hawthorne. I've got voice contact with the missing person, moving to assist." But as I followed the voice, something felt wrong. The words were right, but the tone was off. Too flat, like someone reading from a script. And the voice seemed to be coming from everywhere at once. "Help me," it called again. "I'm lost. I can't find my way back." I'd been doing search and rescue for years. I knew what real panic sounded like. This wasn't it. The voice led me deeper into the forest, past fallen logs thick with moss, through stands of cedar that blocked out most of the gray sky. My radio crackled with static, then went dead. No signal this deep in the woods. "Reed?" I called out. "Marcus Reed, can you hear me?" "I'm here," the voice answered. "I'm right here." But I couldn't see him anywhere. The voice kept calling all afternoon. Sometimes it was close, sometimes far away. Sometimes it seemed to come from above, like Reed was up in the trees somehow. I marked my trail with orange tape, standard procedure. But the deeper I went, the more confused I got. The forest was too quiet. That was the first thing I really noticed. No birds, no insects, no squirrels chattering in the branches. Just my footsteps on the wet earth and that voice calling for help. "I can see you," Reed's voice said suddenly. "You're the ranger, right? I can see your uniform." I spun around, scanning the trees. Nothing, just shadows and fog. "Where are you?" I called back. "I'm hiding," the voice said. "Something's wrong with me. Something's very wrong." There was fear in the voice now, real fear, but it still didn't sound quite right, like someone doing a good imitation of being scared. I found more of Reed's things scattered through the forest. his water bottle hanging from a branch, his compass lying on a rock in the middle of a stream, his wallet wedged in the fork of a tree 8 feet up. Each item was placed where I'd be sure to find it, like someone was leaving me a trail to follow. The fog got thicker as evening approached. I should have headed back, but I couldn't leave Reed out here alone, not with night coming on and the temperature dropping. That's when I saw him. He was standing about 50 yards away, barely visible through the mist. Tall, dark hair, wearing the red flannel shirt described in the missing person report. He waved at me. "Thank God," I called out. "Are you hurt?" Reed didn't answer. He just stood there, watching me approach. As I got closer, I could see his face more clearly. He was smiling, but it was wrong somehow. Too wide, too fixed. "Marcus Reed?" I said, stopping about 10 feet away. He nodded. "That's me. Your friend in Seattle was worried. You were supposed to check in yesterday." "Was I?" Reed tilted his head. "I don't remember that." Something cold crawled up my spine. "How long have you been out here?" "I don't know," he said. "Time gets funny in the woods." I studied his face. The features were right. Dark eyes, square jaw, the small scar on his forehead mentioned in the report. But something was off about the proportions. His eyes were too far apart, his mouth too wide. "Tell me about your friend in Seattle," I said, testing him. "The one who called us." Reed's smile flickered. "My friend?" "Yeah, the one who reported you missing." "I don't have any friends," he said. According to the report, Reed had been staying with his longtime friend, David Chen. They'd planned this camping trip together. "What about your camera?" I sked. "You're a photographer, right?" Reed's head tilted the other way like a bird studying a bug. "I don't know what that is." I took a step back. "Marcus, I need you to come with me. We need to get you back to town, get you checked out by a doctor." "I don't want to go," Reed said. His voice was still calm, but his smile had gotten wider. "I like it here. It's quiet. It's not safe. There's a storm coming." "Is there?" Reed looked up at the sky. I hadn't noticed. As he lifted his head, I saw something that made my stomach drop. The back of his neck was wrong. Instead of normal skin, there was something smooth and gray, like wet clay. "Marcus," I said slowly, "I'm going to need you to turn around and walk back to your camp with me." Reed's smile disappeared. "I don't think so." His voice was different now. Deeper, with an odd echo to it. And his face was changing. The features were shifting, like someone was molding them with their hands. I grabbed my radio, but it was still dead. No signal. "What are you?" I whispered. Reed's face finished changing. The features were still human, but they didn't belong to Marcus Reed anymore. They belonged to my buddy Tommy Park, who'd died in Korea 20 years ago. "Hello, Vince," Tommy's face said with Reed's voice. "Miss me?" I ran. I crashed through the forest like a madman, branches whipping at my face, my old war wound screaming with every step. Behind me I could hear voices, lots of them, all calling my name. "Vince, wait up!" Tommy's voice, the one I'd heard die in a shell crater outside Seoul. "Daddy, where are you going?" That was my daughter Sarah, but she was safe at home in Seattle, 200 miles away. "Don't leave us, Vince!" And that was my ex-wife Karen, but she hadn't called me Vince in years. I stumbled and fell, skinning my hands on the rough bark of a fallen log. The voices were getting closer. I forced myself up and kept running, but I was lost. The orange tape I'd used to mark my trail was gone. Every tree looked the same in the fog. My radio crackled to life. "Ranger Hawthorne, this is base. What's your status?" I grabbed it with shaking hands. "Sally, thank God, I need backup. Something's wrong out here." "Vince?" But it wasn't Sally's voice anymore. It was my daughter again. "Daddy, why did you leave us?" I almost dropped the radio. "Sarah, how did you get on this frequency?" "You promised you'd come home," she said. "You promised we could go camping this weekend." "Sarah, where are you? How are you talking to me?" I'm in the woods, Daddy. I'm lost and scared. Please come find me. I looked around wildly. Sarah, you're not supposed to be here. You're at your mother's house. No, Daddy. I'm right here. Can't you see me? Through the fog, I saw a small figure in a pink jacket. Sarah's jacket. She was standing by a tree about 30 yards away, her back to me. Sarah! I ran toward her, but as I got closer, she started walking away. Sarah, wait! She kept walking, never looking back. I followed her deeper into the forest, my heart pounding. This couldn't be real. Sarah was safe at home. But that was definitely her jacket, her size, her walk. Sarah, please stop. She finally turned around. It wasn't Sarah's face. It was Reed's face, but wrong. The features were melting, shifting, like wax in a fire. The eyes were too big, the mouth too small. And when it spoke, it was with my daughter's voice. Why don't you love me anymore, Daddy? I staggered backward. You're not real. You're not my daughter. I'm exactly your daughter, it said. I'm everything you remember about her. Every word she's ever spoken. Every laugh. Every tear. I'm more real than she is. What are you? The thing wearing Sarah's jacket smiled with a mouth full of too many teeth. I'm what you fear most, Vince. I'm the voice that calls you home, and the home that's never there. More figures emerged from the fog. My other daughter, Emma, wearing her school uniform. My dead war buddy, Ease from Korea. My father, who'd died when I was 12. All of them watching me with wrong faces and familiar voices. Come with us, Vince, they said in unison. Come home. I backed away until I hit a tree. The figures started walking toward me, their movements jerky and unnatural, like puppets on strings. We've been waiting for you, Emma's voice said from a face that kept changing. We've been calling and calling. This isn't real, I whispered. None of this is real. Reality is overrated, my father's voice said. Wouldn't you rather be with us? Wouldn't you rather be where voices never die? They were almost close enough to touch. I could smell them now. Not human smell, but something like wet earth and old metal. I closed my eyes and did the only thing I could think of. I screamed. The sound echoed through the forest, bouncing off the trees and coming back to me from all directions. When I opened my eyes, the figures were gone. But the voices remained, whispering from the shadows. We'll find you, Vince, they said. We'll always find you. I ran again, but this time I had a plan. I knew these woods better than anyone. If I could get to the old fire tower, I could get my bearings. And maybe, just maybe, I could get a radio signal out. The voices followed me all the way. The fire tower stood like a skeleton against the gray sky. I'd climbed it 1,000 times over the years, checking equipment, watching for smoke. Now it might be my salvation. I was halfway up the metal stairs when I heard the voice below. Vince? Vince, is that you? I looked down. Marcus Reed stood at the base of the tower, looking up at me. This time he looked exactly right, the real Reed, not the shifting nightmare I'd seen before. Marcus? I called down. Are you okay? I think so, he said. I've been hiding. There's something in the woods, something that sounds like people, but I... Listen. My heart leaped. Maybe Reed was real. Maybe he'd been hiding while that thing impersonated him. Stay right there, I called. I'm coming down. But as I started back down the stairs, Reed called up again. Actually, Vince, why don't you come down and bring your radio? I think I can help you call for backup. I stopped. Reed couldn't have known my name. I'd never told him. How do you know I'm Vince? Reed looked confused. You told me, remember? When you found me in the woods? I never found you, Marcus. I found something pretending to be you. Reed's face went blank for a moment. Then he smiled, and it was that same wrong smile from before. You're very observant, Vince. Most people don't catch on so quickly. His voice was changing as he spoke, becoming deeper, more hollow. His face began to shift again, the features flowing like liquid. What do you want? I called down. I want your voice, it said. I want to add it to my collection. You have such a nice voice, Vince. So much pain in it, so much loss. I could do wonderful things with a voice like that. Go to hell. The thing that wasn't Reed laughed. I've been to hell, Vince. This is much more interesting. It started climbing the tower. Its movements were wrong, too fluid, like it didn't have proper joints. I kept climbing up, but the tower only went so high. Tell me about your daughters, it called as it climbed. Sarah and Emma, such pretty names. I'd love to meet them. Stay away from them. But I already know them, Vince. I know them through you. Every time you've spoken their names, every time you've called them on the radio, I've been listening. I know exactly how they sound when they're happy, when they're sad, when they're scared. I reached the top of the tower and grabbed the emergency radio. Please let it work. Please let there be a signal. Mayday, Mayday, this is Ranger Hawthorne at Fire Tower 7. I need immediate assistance. Static. Then, Daddy? Daddy, is that you? Sarah's voice coming through the radio, but she couldn't be on this frequency. She was just a kid. Daddy, we're scared. Mommy won't wake up and there's someone at the door. Someone who sounds just like you. My blood turned to ice. Sarah, where are you? We're at home, Daddy, but it's not safe. The man at the door, he knows things. He knows about the camping trip, about your war, about everything. And he sounds exactly like you. I looked down. The thing climbing the tower had stopped. It was watching me, smiling with Reed's face. My friends are very efficient, it said. They should be at your house right about now. Sarah, listen to me carefully, I said into the radio. Don't open the door. Don't let anyone in, no matter what they sound like. But Daddy, he says he needs to come in. He says there's danger and he needs to protect us. It's not me, Sarah. Whatever's at the door, it's not me. How do we know you're really you? Emma's voice came through the radio now. How do we know this isn't a trick? The thing had reached the top of the tower. It pulled itself up onto the platform, and I saw its true form for the first time. It was almost human, but wrong in every way. Too tall, too thin, with skin like wet clay. Its face was a blank oval that shifted and changed as I watched. Because I love you, I said into the radio, backing away from the creature. Because I love you both more than anything in the world. The thing's face solidified into Reed's features. That's very touching, Vince. But love won't save them. Nothing will. I had one chance. One desperate, stupid chance. I pulled out my emergency flare and pointed it at the creature. I don't know what you are, but I know what you're not. You're not human, you're not real, and you're not getting my voice. The creature laughed. Fire won't stop me, Vince. I've survived worse than... I pulled the trigger. The flare hit the creature's center mass, and it screamed. Not with any voice I'd heard before, but with a sound like tearing metal. Its form began to dissolve, the fake flesh burning away to reveal something underneath that hurt to look at. This isn't over, it said with a dozen different voices. I have your pattern now. I know how you sound. I'll use it forever. The creature fell from the tower, but it didn't hit the ground. It dissolved into smoke and shadow, carried away by the wind. I grabbed the radio. Sarah? Emma? Are you there? Static. Then, finally, Daddy? I'm here, sweetheart. Are you okay? The man at the door went away. He just disappeared. Good. I'm coming home. I'm coming home right now. I found Marcus Reed 2 days later, alive but changed. He was in a cave system beneath the old CCC camp, throat damaged from screaming, eyes wide with terror. He couldn't speak, might never speak again. But he was human. He was real. The official report called it an animal attack. Equipment malfunction. Reed's injuries were from a bear, they said. My account was classified as stress-induced hallucination, trauma from my war service finally catching up with me. They transferred me to a desk job, said I needed time to recover. But I knew the truth. The creature was still out there, somewhere in the vast wilderness. And it had my voice now. I lost custody of my daughters. The court said I was mentally unstable, unable to provide proper care. Karen got full custody, moved them to California. I haven't seen them in person since, but I hear them sometimes. late at night when I'm monitoring the emergency frequencies. Their voices calling for help, lost in the woods. And sometimes, mixed in with theirs, I hear my own voice, calling back to them, promising to save them. I know it's not real. I know it's the creature using the voices it's stolen. But that doesn't make it any less painful to hear. Other rangers have started disappearing, not just here, but in forests across the Pacific Northwest. The pattern is always the same. Personal items found in impossible places, voices calling for help that lead searchers deeper into the wilderness. And I keep detailed logs now. Every anomaly, every impossible radio transmission, every report of voices that don't quite sound right. I'm building a case file, documenting the evidence. Maybe someday someone will believe me. Until then, I wait. I listen. And I warn anyone who'll listen about the voices in the void. Because somewhere out there, in the deep woods where cell phones don't work and radios fail, something is collecting voices. Our voices. The sounds we make when we're happy, when we're sad, when we're dying. And it's using them to call others home. My name is Vincent Hawthorne. I'm a forest ranger with 13 years of service. And I'm telling you now, if you hear someone calling your name in the woods, if you hear the voice of someone you love echoing through the trees, don't follow it. Don't answer. Just run. Because some voices should stay buried, and some calls should never be answered. The creature is still out there, still hunting, still collecting, and it knows exactly how I sound when I'm afraid. My name is Catherine Ironbear, but everyone calls me Kate. I'm a ranger in the Superior National Forest, and I've been working these woods for 7 years now. I'm telling you this story because I need someone to know what really happened out there in January of 1981. The official reports say it was an animal attack during bad weather. That's not what happened. I grew up on the Leech Lake Reservation, listening to my grandmother's stories about the old days. She told me about the Wendigo, a creature of endless hunger that walked the winter woods. I always thought those stories were just warnings about the dangers of cannibalism during harsh winters. Something to scare kids into staying close to home when the snow got deep. I should have listened better. The morning everything started, I was sitting in the ranger station drinking coffee and watching the weather reports. A massive blizzard was moving in from Canada, bringing temperatures down to 40 below. The kind of cold that kills you in minutes if you're not prepared. I was planning to spend the day checking on the emergency shelters along the main trails when the call came in. "Kate, we've got a missing family," my supervisor Tom said, his voice tight with worry. "The Hendricks family from Duluth. They were supposed to check in yesterday from their winter camping trip near Devil's Lake." Devil's Lake. Even the name made me uncomfortable. It was deep in the Boundary Waters, a place where the old-timers said you shouldn't go alone in winter. But I'd been there plenty of times for rescues, just another frozen lake surrounded by pine trees. "How many in the party?" I asked, already pulling on my winter gear. 4, parents and 2 kids, ages 8 and 10. They're experienced winter campers, but with this storm coming in, I nodded. Even experienced people made mistakes in the wilderness, and mistakes in January means in death. I loaded my sled with emergency supplies, medical gear, and enough food for a week. My grandmother had taught me that you always prepare for the worst in winter. The drive to the trailhead took 2 hours through increasingly heavy snow. The trees were already bending under the weight of ice, and the wind was picking up. By the time I reached Devil's Lake, I could barely see 50 feet ahead. I found their campsite without much trouble. The bright orange tent was still standing, which was a good sign. But as I got closer, something felt wrong. The tent flaps were torn, hanging loose in the wind. Snow had blown inside, covering everything with a thick white layer. "Hello?" I called out. "Forest Service. Anyone here?" No answer. Just the wind howling through the trees. I examined the campsite carefully. Their breakfast was still on the camp table, frozen solid. Pancakes stuck to plates like yellow ice. Coffee cups half full and frozen. Whatever had happened, it was sudden. Then I saw the blood. Dark red stains in the snow, leading away from the tent toward the tree line. My stomach dropped. This wasn't looking like a simple case of people getting lost in the storm. I followed the blood trail, my boots crunching through the deep snow. The tracks were strange. Some looked like boots, others were bare feet. In this cold, bare feet meant someone was in serious trouble. But there were other tracks too. Huge ones, bigger than any human foot I'd ever seen. That's when I found him. Mr. Hendricks was lying face down about 100 yards from the campsite. At first I thought he'd collapsed from the cold, but when I turned him over, I saw that pieces of him were missing. Large chunks of flesh had been torn away from his arms and legs. The wounds weren't clean like an animal attack. They looked like bite marks, human bite marks. I'd seen enough accidents in my 7 years as a ranger to know what different injuries looked like. This wasn't a bear attack or a wolf. Someone had eaten parts of this man while he was still alive. My radio crackled with static. The storm was getting worse, and I was losing contact with the outside world. I tried calling for backup, but all I got was white noise. I was alone out here with a dead man and 3 missing people. As I knelt beside Mr. Hendricks' body, something strange happened. I suddenly felt incredibly hungry. Not just regular hungry. It was like I hadn't eaten in days. My stomach cramped with need, and I found myself looking at the dead man's body and thinking about food. I shook my head hard. That was crazy. I'd eaten a big breakfast just hours ago, but the hunger was getting worse, gnawing at me like a living thing. I forced myself to focus on the job. 3 people were still missing, including 2 children. Whatever had happened here, I needed to find them before the storm got any worse. The temperature was dropping fast and the wind was picking up. In a few hours, this place would be completely uninhabitable. I gathered my gear and started following the other tracks leading away from the campsite. They headed deeper into the forest toward areas where few people ever went. As I walked, I kept feeling like something was watching me from the trees. Every time I turned around, I saw nothing but snow and shadows. But the hunger was getting stronger. The trail led me deeper into the forest than I'd ever been. The trees grew thicker here, blocking out most of the weak winter sunlight. Everything was quiet except for the wind and the crunch of snow under my boots. Too quiet. In a healthy forest, you hear birds, squirrels, small sounds of life. Here, there was nothing. I'd been following the tracks for about an hour when I found the second body. Mrs. Hendricks was sitting against a large pine tree, her eyes wide open and staring. At first I thought she was just frozen to death, but when I got closer, I saw the truth. She had been eating her own fingers. 3 fingers on 2. Her left hand were gone, bitten off at the knuckles. Her mouth was stained with frozen blood. The look in her eyes wasn't fear or pain. It was hunger. Even in death, she looked hungry. I've seen hypothermia victims before. Sometimes they do strange things in the final stages, take off their clothes or dig holes in the snow. But this was different. This was like she'd been driven mad by hunger so intense that she'd started eating herself. My radio gave a brief burst of static, then went dead completely. I was officially cut off from the outside world. The storm was getting worse, and I could feel the temperature dropping. I had maybe 6 hours of daylight left, and then I'd be stuck out here in the dark. I found a sheltered spot behind some rocks and made a quick camp. I needed to eat something and warm up before I could continue searching for the children. As I heated up some soup on my portable stove, that strange hunger hit me again, even stronger this time. I found myself staring at my own hand, thinking about how the meat would taste. The thought was so clear and specific that it scared me. I'd never had thoughts like that before. I forced myself to drink the soup, but it didn't help. The hunger was still there, growing stronger. That's when I heard the voice. "Help me," it called from somewhere in the trees. A child's voice, high and scared. "Please, someone help me." I grabbed my flashlight and headed toward the sound. The voice came again, closer this time. "I'm so hungry. Please, I need food." I found the little girl about 50 yards from my camp. She was maybe 8 years old, wearing a torn winter jacket and no boots. Her feet were blue with frostbite, and she was shivering so hard she could barely stand. "Hey there," I said softly, not wanting to scare her. I'm Kate. I'm a ranger. I'm here to help you." The girl looked at me with the same expression I'd seen on her mother's face. Hungry. Desperately, impossibly hungry. "I need food," she whispered. "I'm so hungry it hurts." I gave her some emergency food bars from my pack, but she barely touched them. Instead, she kept staring at me with those wide, hungry eyes, like she was thinking about something else entirely. "Where's your brother?" I asked. "He's back at the cave," she said. "He's hungry too. We're all so hungry." Cave? I hadn't seen any caves on the maps of this area. But I'd learned to trust local knowledge over maps. Kids notice things adults miss. "Can you show me where he is?" The girl nodded and started walking deeper into the forest. I followed, but something felt wrong. She wasn't walking like someone with severe frostbite. She was moving easily through the snow, almost like she wasn't feeling the cold at all. After about 20 minutes, we reached a small clearing. On the far side was a dark opening in the rocks, a cave I'd never seen before. The girl stopped at the entrance and turned back to me. "He's inside," she said, "but he's changed. The hunger changed him." Before I could ask what she meant, a scream echoed from inside the cave. Not a human scream. Something else. Something that had once been human, but wasn't anymore. The girl smiled, and I saw that her teeth were stained with blood. "He's been eating," she said. "We all have. It's the only way to make the hunger stop." I backed away from the cave entrance, my hand moving to the radio on my belt. Still dead. I was alone with these children who weren't acting like children anymore. That's when I saw the bones. They were scattered around the cave entrance, partially hidden by snow. Human bones, picked clean. Some were small, child-sized. Others were adult. How many people had disappeared out here over the years? How many had been written off as getting lost in the wilderness? The girl was still smiling at me. "You feel it too, don't you? The hunger. It's growing inside you. Soon you'll understand." She was right. The hunger was getting stronger by the minute. My stomach felt Leah's. It was eating itself from the inside. Every time I looked at the girl, I found myself thinking about how soft her skin looked, how easy it would be to just take a small bite. I shook my head hard. This was insane. I was thinking about eating a child. What was wrong with me? "There's something in the woods," the girl said. "Something old and hungry. It's been waiting for the right people to come along. People who understand what real hunger feels like." From inside the cave came another sound. Footsteps, but wrong somehow. Too heavy, too slow. Something was moving in there. Something big. "My brother wants to meet you," the girl said. "He's been waiting." I turned and ran. Behind me, I heard the girl laughing. It was a sound no 8-year-old should be able to make. Deep and cruel and very, very hungry. I ran through the forest like something was chasing me, crashing through snowdrifts and low branches. My breath came in sharp puffs of white steam, and my lungs burned from the cold air. But I couldn't stop. Something was wrong with those children. Something was wrong with this whole place. I made it back to my emergency camp just as the sun was setting. The temperature had dropped even more, and the wind was howling through the trees like a living thing. I needed to get warm and figure out what to do next. As I huddled by my small camp stove, I tried to make sense of what I'd seen. The parents were dead, killed by something that made them eat their own flesh. The children were alive but changed, talking about hunger and caves and something old in the woods. And I was feeling it too. The hunger was constant now, a gnawing emptiness that normal food couldn't fill. I'd eaten everything in my emergency pack, but it didn't help. I kept thinking about meat, fresh meat, still warm. I forced myself to focus on practical things. I had enough supplies for maybe 2 days. Tea. The storm was getting worse, and I was cut off from any help. My best bet was to wait until morning and try to hike out to the main trail. But I couldn't leave those children out here. Even if something was wrong with them, they were still kids. They needed help. I was trying to decide what to do when I heard footsteps in the snow outside my shelter. Slow, deliberate footsteps that were too heavy to be human. "Kate," a voice called. A man's voice, but distorted somehow. Too deep, too hollow. "Kate, are you in there?" I grabbed my flashlight and pointed it toward the sound. At first, I didn't see anything. Then, something moved at the edge of the light beam. It was tall, impossibly tall, at least 12 feet, maybe more. It was thin to the point of being skeletal, covered in yellowed skin that looked like old leather. Its arms hung down almost to the ground, ending in hands with fingers like claws. But the worst part was its face. It had once been human, I could tell. But now it was stretched and distorted, with hollow cheeks and eyes that glowed yellow in the darkness. Its mouth was too wide, full of broken teeth. "I know you're hungry, Kate," it said. "I can smell it on you. The hunger is growing, isn't it? Soon you'll understand." I tried to back away, but my legs wouldn't move. I was frozen with terror and something else, a horrible fascination. Part of me wanted to get closer to this thing, to understand what it was. "You've seen the children," it continued. "You've seen what the hunger can do. But they're just the beginning. The hunger is spreading. Soon, everyone will feel it." The creature took a step closer, and I could see more details in the flashlight beam. Its skin was covered in frost, but it didn't seem to feel the cold. Snow clung to its hair, which was long and matted with ice. "What are you?" I whispered. It smiled, showing those broken teeth. "I am what happens when the hunger wins. I am what you will become, Kate. What we all become, in the end. The children are mine now. The hunger claimed them first. But don't worry, you'll join them soon. You can feel it, can't you? The need, the emptiness inside that nothing can fill except—" It didn't finish the sentence, but I knew what it meant. The only thing that would satisfy this hunger was human flesh. I found my voice. "You're the Wendigo, from the old stories." The creature laughed, a sound like ice breaking. "Your grandmother's stories were warnings, Kate, but warnings no one listened to. I've been waiting in these woods for so long, feeding on the occasional lost hiker or hunter. But now I have a family again. Children who understand the hunger." Behind the creature, I could see other shapes moving in the darkness. The two children from the cave. But they looked different now. Thinner, with two long limbs and eyes that reflected the light like an animal's. "Join us, Kate," the Wendigo said. "Stop fighting the hunger. Let it take you. It's so much easier than fighting." The hunger was getting stronger. I could feel my willpower weakening. The creature was right. It would be easier to give in, to stop fighting this impossible need and just eat. I shook my head. "No, I won't become like you." The Wendigo's smile faded. "Then you'll die fighting it. The hunger will drive you mad first. You'll eat your own flesh, like the others, and then you'll die slowly, still hungry, still wanting more." It gestured to the children. "Show her what happens to those who resist." The little girl stepped forward, and I could see what the hunger had done to her. Her skin was pulled tight over her bones, and her fingers had grown into claws. When she opened her mouth, I saw rows of sharp teeth. "It doesn't hurt after the first bite," she said in a voice like winter wind. "The hunger goes away. You just have to let it happen." The boy nodded agreement. He was even more changed than his sister, his limbs elongated and his eyes completely yellow now. He had to fight it at first. But the hunger always wins. It's better this way. I backed away from all of them, my mind racing. My grandmother had told me stories about the Wendigo, but she'd also told me how to fight it. Sacred fire, she'd said, and iron. And most importantly, you had to remember who you were. You couldn't let the hunger take your identity. "I know what you are," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "And I know how to stop you." The Wendigo laughed again. "Many have tried, Kate. Their bones feed the forest now. But please, Try. It's been so long since I had a real hunt. The creature raised its claws, and I saw that they were stained with old blood. Behind it, the children were spreading out, trying to surround me. I had one advantage. I knew these woods better than they did. I'd been hiking and camping here for years, and I knew every trail and hiding spot. If I could get away from them, I might be able to reach the old ranger cabin where I kept emergency supplies, including flares. Fire was the key. I threw my flashlight at the Wendigo's face and ran into the darkness. Behind me, I heard the creature roar with anger and frustration. Then came the sound of pursuit. Footsteps that were too fast and too heavy to be human. The children were faster than the adult creature, and I could hear them gaining on me as I crashed through the forest. Branches whipped at my face, and I stumbled over hidden roots and rocks. But I kept running, driven by terror and a desperate need to survive. I could see the cabin ahead, a dark shape against the snow. If I could reach it, I might have a chance. But the hunger was making me weak, and I was stumbling more with each step. Something grabbed my ankle, and I went down hard. The boy was there, his claws digging into my leg. His face was right next to mine, and I could smell the death on his breath. "Stop running," he whispered. "The hunger will catch you anyway. Let us help you." I kicked him in the face and rolled away. My leg was bleeding, but I could still walk. The cabin was just ahead now, maybe 50 yards away. I stumbled through the door and slammed it shut behind me, throwing the bolt. Outside, I could hear them scratching at the walls, trying to find a way in. The Wendigo's voice echoed through the forest. "You can't hide forever, Kate. The hunger will drive you out, and when it does, we'll be waiting." I leaned against the door, breathing hard. My leg was throbbing where the boy had clawed me, and I could feel the wounds burning with cold. But I was alive, and I was inside. Now I just had to figure out how to fight a creature that shouldn't exist. The hunger was still there, stronger than ever, but now I knew what it was, and maybe, just maybe, I could use my grandmother's wisdom to fight it. The cabin had emergency supplies that I'd stocked over the years: medical kit, extra food, and most importantly, flares. I bandaged my leg as best I could while the scratching continued outside. The wounds were deep, but they'd stopped bleeding. I had bigger problems than a few cuts. I tried to remember everything my grandmother had told me about the Wendigo. It was a creature of endless hunger, born from cannibalism and winter desperation. But it could be fought with fire, especially sacred fire. And there was something else. Something about the creature's true nature that I was forgetting. The scratching stopped suddenly. Outside, everything was quiet except for the wind. That was somehow worse than the noise. At least when they were scratching, I knew where they were. I looked out the window and saw them standing in the clearing. The Wendigo was in the center with the two children flanking it. They were just standing there, watching the cabin, waiting. "Kate," the Wendigo called. "I can smell your blood. The hunger is in your wounds now. Soon it will spread through your whole body." I looked down at my bandaged leg. The wounds were starting to itch and burn. Was it infection or something worse? "You can't fight what you're becoming," the creature continued. "The hunger is part of you now. It's in your blood, in your bones. Soon you'll be like us, free from the pain of wanting, free from the emptiness." I pulled out one of the flares and held it ready. If they tried to break in, I'd at least go down fighting. But I was starting to understand that this wasn't just about survival. There was something bigger happening here. "Your grandmother knew," the Wendigo said, its voice carrying easily through the walls. "She knew I was here. She knew what I was. That's why she told you the stories, to prepare you for this moment." My grandmother. I thought about her words, trying to remember exactly what she'd said about fighting the Wendigo. Sacred fire, yes, but there was something else. Something about the creature's origin. "I was like you once," the Wendigo continued. "A man who came to these woods in winter, 1878 it was. I was part of a fur trapping expedition that got caught in a blizzard. We were trapped for weeks, slowly starving. When the food ran out, we started eating leather, bark, anything we could find, but it wasn't enough. I remembered now. My grandmother had mentioned this story, about trappers who'd disappeared in the late 1800s. Only one man had made it out, and he'd been found days later, raving about monsters in the woods. The hunger became everything, the Wendigo said. It consumed my thoughts, my dreams, my soul. And when my partner died of cold, I ate him. And then I ate the others. And with each bite, I became less human and more... this. The creature gestured to itself. The hunger changed me, transformed me into something that could survive the winter, but it also trapped me. I can never be satisfied, never be full. I can only spread the hunger to others. I was starting to understand. The Wendigo wasn't just a monster. It was a man who'd been destroyed by his own desperate choices, and now it was trying to create more creatures like itself. The children will be like me soon, it'd say. Ed, the hunger will transform them completely, and then they'll help me spread it to others, village by village, town by town, until everyone understands what real hunger feels like. The itching in my leg was getting worse. I could feel something moving under my skin, like the hunger was literally eating me from the inside. I didn't have much time. I thought about my grandmother's other stories. She'd always said that the Wendigo was a trapped soul, unable to find peace. But she'd also said that fire could free it, not just destroy it, but actually release the human soul that was trapped inside. I opened the door and stepped out into the clearing. The three creatures turned to look at me, and I could see surprise in their glowing eyes. "I'm not running anymore," I said, holding the flare high. "I know what you are, and I know how to help you." The Wendigo tilted its head. "Help me. Child, you cannot help what I have become." "You're not a monster," I said. "You're a man who made a terrible choice and got trapped by it. You've been suffering for over 100 years, and you're trying to make others suffer with you, so you won't be alone." The creature's expression changed. For a moment, I saw something human in its eyes. Pain, loneliness, and terrible regret. "I can't change what I am," it whispered. "Maybe not," I said. "But you can choose to end it. You can choose to let go." I struck the flare, and it burst into bright red flame. The creatures backed away, but I could see something else in their expressions now. Hope. "Sacred fire," I said, remembering my grandmother's words. "Not to destroy, but to purify, to release what's been trapped." The Wendigo looked at the flare, then at me. "You would do this? Even after what I've done to you?" "My grandmother taught me that everyone deserves peace," I said. "Even monsters, especially monsters." The creature nodded slowly. "Owly. The children, they're not too far gone yet. The hunger hasn't fully transformed them. If you can break the connection..." I understood. The Wendigo was the source. If I could free its trapped soul, the hunger would die with it. "Thank you," the creature whispered. "I have been so tired for so long." I threw the flare at the Wendigo's feet. The sacred fire spread quickly, engulfing the creature in purifying flame. But instead of screaming in pain, it smiled. For the first time in over a century, the man who had become a monster looked peaceful. As the fire consumed the Wendigo, I saw something else, a human figure in the flames, young and whole and free. The trapped soul was finally being released. The children collapsed as the connection was broken. The hunger left them instantly, and they became just kids again, scared, cold, and confused, but human. The fire burned until dawn, when the storm finally broke. By the time I hiked out with the children, there was nothing left in the clearing but ash and memory. The official report said it was exposure and hypothermia, complicated by hypothermic hallucinations. The children had been found suffering from severe malnutrition and frostbite, but they recovered fully. They don't remember much about their time in the woods, which is probably for the best. I was treated for my injuries and given mandatory counseling. The counselor said I'd experienced a severe psychological break brought on by isolation and stress. She recommended I take time off, maybe consider a desk job. I didn't argue. There was no point in trying to explain what really happened. Who would believe a story about a century-old cannibal monster stalking the Minnesota woods? It was easier to let them think I'd had a breakdown. But I knew the truth. And more importantly, I knew it was over. The hunger that had stalked these woods for over 100 years was finally gone. The trapped soul of a desperate man had found peace at last. The children were returned to their surviving relatives and eventually recovered completely. They grew up to be normal, healthy adults with no memory of their time in the creature's influence. Sometimes I wonder if they ever have strange dreams about winter and hunger, but I hope not. I transferred to a different district after my recovery. I couldn't bring myself to work in the Superior Forest anymore. Too many memories, too many shadows in the trees. But I kept in touch with the other rangers, and I made sure to monitor the missing persons reports. There haven't been any unusual disappearances in the area since that winter. No more stories about hunters found partially eaten or campers driven to cannibalism. The woods are normal again, as normal as deep wilderness can be. I'm older now, close to retirement. I never married David. The experience changed me too much for that relationship to work. But I found other ways to honor what I'd learned. I became a keeper of the old stories, working with tribal elders to preserve the traditional knowledge that might be needed again someday. Because I know the truth about the things that live in the deep woods. Most of them are just animals, following their nature. But some are older, stranger, more dangerous. And sometimes, very rarely, they need to be stopped. The Wendigo is gone. The hunger that walked these woods for over a century has been laid to rest. But there are other things out there. Other creatures born from human desperation and supernatural malice. And when they surface, there need to be people who remember the old ways, who know how to fight the darkness. That's my job now. Not just as a ranger, but as someone who's seen what lurks in the spaces between the known and unknown. I watch for the signs, listen for the stories, and try to be ready for whatever comes next. Because something always comes next. The wilderness is vast and old, and it holds secrets that civilization has forgotten. Most of the time, that's fine. And we can coexist with the mysteries. But sometimes, very rarely, the mysteries come looking for us. And when they do, we need to be ready. The hunger is gone from these woods. But hunger takes many forms, and the wilderness is patient. It remembers things we've forgotten, harbors things we've pushed aside. I'll keep watching. I'll keep listening. And if something else rises from the deep woods, something that threatens the innocent, I'll be ready. Because that's what my grandmother would have wanted. That's what the man who became a monster would have wanted, in his final moments of peace. The woods are quiet now, but they're never truly empty, and I'll be here, watching, for as long as I'm needed. My name is Marcus Redfield, but everyone calls me Mark. I've been a ranger in the Ozark National Forest for 18 years now, and I thought I'd seen everything these woods could throw at me. Bears that got too comfortable around campsites, mountain lions stalking hikers, coyotes picking off livestock. Hell, I even dealt with a few meth labs hidden back in the hollers where nobody goes. But nothing prepared me for what happened in October of 1987. I was 41 then, getting ready to think about retirement in a few years. My left hand was already gone. Lost it in a hunting accident when I was younger, replaced it with a prosthetic that worked well enough. Vietnam had taken some hearing and given me a bad back, but I could still track better than men half my age. Had to. It was my job to keep these woods safe. The forest was beautiful that October. The leaves were turning, painting the hills in reds and golds. Hunting season was in full swing, which meant my radio never stopped crackling with reports. Lost hunters, minor accidents, the usual complaints about someone's camp being too loud. The Buffalo River area was packed with guys from Little Rock and Memphis, all hoping to bag a big buck. I'd just remarried the year before. Jenny was a teacher at the local elementary school, and she came with a teenage son named Tommy. Good kid, but he wasn't too happy about having a new stepdad, especially one who spent most of his time in the woods. I was trying to build that relationship, you know? Wanted to show him I could be a father figure, not just the guy who married his mom. The weather was perfect for hunting. Crisp mornings with heavy fog that burned off by noon. Cool enough to keep the deer moving. I was checking on the various camps, making sure everyone had proper permits and weren't doing anything stupid. Most of the hunters were experienced guys who came up a year. They knew the rules. That's why what happened to the Fletcher party didn't make any sense. I got the call on October 15th around 3 in the afternoon. A group of campers had found something bad near Skull Creek about 12 miles into the backcountry. They wouldn't say much over the radio, just that I needed to get there fast and bring backup. The hike took me 2 hours through rough terrain. The Fletcher camp was set up in a small clearing beside the creek, 5 tents arranged in a neat circle around a fire pit. It should have been a peaceful scene. Instead, I found 5 dead men. They were lying in a perfect circle, feet pointing toward the center where their campfire had been. All experienced hunters. I knew most of them personally. Bob Fletcher had been coming to these woods for 20 years. His brother Dave was a military man, always alert, always prepared. The other 3 were locals who knew every trail and every hiding spot. But they'd died without firing a shot. Their rifles were still in their tents. Their sidearms were still holstered. Whatever killed them had been fast and quiet enough that 5 experienced hunters never had a chance to defend themselves. The wounds were wrong, too. Deep slashes across the throat and chest, like from massive claws. But the spacing was off. Too wide for any bear I'd ever seen, too deep for a mountain lion. And there were bite marks on the bones that didn't match any animal in Arkansas. I found the tracks about 50 yards from camp. They started out looking like wolf prints, but bigger than any wolf had a right to be. As I followed them, something strange happened. The prints began to change. The claws got shorter, the pads became longer. By the time I'd tracked them 100 yards, they looked almost like human footprints. But humans don't have claws. I called in the state police and the coroner, but I all read. 80 knew what they'd find. No answers. No explanation that made sense. Just 5 dead men and tracks that shouldn't exist. That night, lying in bed next to Jenny, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching the house. I kept getting up to check the windows, but I never saw anything. Just the feeling of eyes in the darkness. "You're scaring me, Mark," Jenny whispered. "What's wrong?" I wanted to tell her about the tracks, about the way those men had died, about the smell I'd caught at the crime scene, a musky animal scent that didn't belong to any creature I knew. But how do you explain something like that to your wife? "Just work stuff," I said. "Nothing to worry about." But I was lying, because somewhere out there in the darkness, something was hunting. Something that killed with the savagery of a wild animal, but had the intelligence to arrange bodies in a circle. Something that left tracks that changed from beast to human as it walked, and I had the terrible feeling it wasn't done yet. The next morning brought more reports. 3 different hunting parties had heard strange howling during the night. Not coyotes, not wolves, but something else. Something that howled in patterns, like they were talking to each other. I drove out to interview the hunters, my prosthetic hand gripping the steering wheel tighter than usual. The phantom pain was acting up, like it always did when I was stressed. Vietnam had taught me to trust my instincts, and every instinct I had was screaming danger. The Morrison camp was about 8 miles from where the Fletcher party died. 3 guys from Memphis, all lawyers who came up every year to play cowboy for a week. They were packing up when I arrived. "We're getting the hell out of here," said Jim Morrison, the eldest of the group. His hands were shaking as he stuffed his sleeping bag into its case. "I've been hunting these woods for 15 years, and I've never heard anything like that." "Tell me about the howling," I said, pulling out my notebook. "Started around midnight," Morrison said. "Came from all directions at once, but it wasn't random. They were answering each other like they were coordinating something, and the sound..." He shuddered. "It was wrong, too deep, too intelligent, like they were talking in some kind of code." His buddy Pete nodded. We all grabbed our guns and sat back to back around the fire. The howling went on for maybe 10 minutes, then stopped. But we could feel them out there watching us. "Them?" I asked. However many there were. Had to be at least 6 or 7 based on the different voices. But here's the weird part. Around 2 in the morning, we heard one of them calling out words. I stopped writing. Words? Human words. It sounded like someone calling for help, but the voice was all wrong. Too deep, too hungry. Like something was trying to imitate a human voice, but couldn't quite get it right. They finished packing and left within the hour. I couldn't blame them. The other 2 camps reported similar experiences. Coordinated howling that sounded like communication. The feeling of being watched by multiple sets of eyes. And in each case, the animals had gone silent. No birds, no squirrels, no insects. Like the whole forest was holding its breath. I spent the day hiking the area between the camps looking for more tracks. I found plenty. The same impossible prints that changed from animal to human. But these were fresher, and there were more of them. At least 6 different sets, all following the same general pattern. As I tracked them deeper into the woods, I started to notice other things. Claw marks on trees, 8 feet off the ground. Scent markings that smelled like wet dog mixed with something else. Something that made my hair stand up. And bones. Lots of bones, arranged in small piles like offerings. The trail led me to a steep valley I'd never explored before. The sides were covered in thick forest, and at the bottom was a creek that disappeared into a cave system. I'd heard about these caves, but never had reason to investigate them. Now I was wishing I had. I was about to head down into the valley when I heard it. A howl, deep and resonant, coming from somewhere across the creek, then another answering from my left, then a third from behind me. I was surrounded. I pulled out my radio, but all I got was static. The feeling of being watched was so strong I could taste it, metallic and sharp on my tongue. Very slowly, I reached for my sidearm. That's when I saw it. About 100 yards away, standing on a rocky outcrop on the far side of the valley, was something that shouldn't exist. It was huge, maybe 8 feet tall, with the general shape of a man, but covered in dark fur. Its head was wrong, too long, too narrow, with ears that stood up like a wolf's, and its eyes reflected the late afternoon sun like yellow mirrors. It was watching me. As I stared, it raised what looked like a human hand and made a gesture, a signal. Immediately I heard movement in the forest around me, the soft sound of large bodies moving through the underbrush. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't alone. I backed away slowly, never taking my eyes off the creature. It followed my movement, tracking me like a predator tracks prey. When I reached the edge of the valley, it tilted its head back and howled, a sound that raised every hair on my body. The howl was answered from 6 different directions. I ran. I'm not proud of it, but I ran like a scared rabbit through those woods, crashing through undergrowth and leaping over fallen logs. Behind me, I could hear them giving chase, not the 4-legged gallop of normal animals, but the steady rhythm of bipedal runners. They were following me, but they weren't trying to catch me. They were herding me. I burst out of the tree line near the main forest road, gasping and covered in sweat. My truck was parked about 50 yards away. I fumbled for my keys with my good hand, looking back over my shoulder at the woods. They were there, just inside the truck. Eline. I could see their shapes in the shadows, tall, wrong, watching me with those yellow eyes. But they didn't come into the open. They just watched as I started my truck and drove away. That night, I locked every door and window in the house. I told Jenny I was coming down with something and went to bed early, but I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those yellow eyes staring at me from the darkness. Around midnight, I heard scratching at the bedroom window. I grabbed my pistol and crept to the window, pulling back the curtain just enough to peek out. The yard was empty, but I could see fresh gouges in the window frame, deep scratches that looked like they'd been made by claws. Something had been testing our defenses. The attacks started 3 days later. I was at the ranger station when the call came in. Another hunting party, this one near Possum Creek. 2 survivors, 3 dead. I grabbed my emergency kit and headed out, but I already knew what I'd find. The survivors were brothers named Carl and Danny Hutchins. They were sitting in their truck with the engine running, too scared to get out. Both men were in their 50s, experienced hunters who'd been coming to these woods since they were kids. They came out of nowhere, Carl said, his voice shaking. Me and Danny were checking our snares when we heard Mike scream. By the time we got back to camp, they were all ready. He couldn't finish. The 3 bodies were arranged the same way as the Fletcher party, in a circle, feet pointing inward. But this time, there were signs of a struggle. The camp was torn apart, tents shredded, supplies scattered, and there was blood everywhere. More than 3 men should have been able to bleed. Tell me exactly what you saw, I said. Danny looked at his brother, then back at me. You ain't gonna believe us. Try me. They looked like wolves, but they stood up like people. Big ones, bigger than any man, and they were working together, like they had it all planned out. One of them grabbed Mike while the other 2 went after Roy and Jim. It was over in seconds. How many were there? We saw 3, but there were more in the woods. Had to be. They were howling back and forth, coordinating the whole thing. I spent the rest of the day processing the scene and interviewing the survivors. The story never changed. 3 bipedal wolves had attacked their camp in broad daylight, killing 3 experienced hunters in seconds. The tracks confirmed it. The same impossible prints that changed from animal to human. But this time, I found something else. Tool marks on some of the trees, like something had been using rocks to mark territory. And the arrangement of the bodies was different, more deliberate, more ritualistic. Whatever these things were, they were getting bolder. That night, I sat Jenny and Tommy down for a serious talk. I need you both to listen to me carefully, I said. There's something dangerous in the woods. I don't know exactly what it is yet, but people are dying. I need you to stay away from the forest until I figure this out. Tommy rolled his eyes. Come on, Mark. It's just some crazy animal, right? You'll shoot it and everything will be fine. No, I said firmly. It's not just an animal. And I need you to promise me you'll stay close to town. Both of you. Jenny could see the fear in my eyes. Mark, what aren't you telling us? I wanted to tell her everything, about the creature I'd seen on the ridge, about the intelligence in those yellow eyes, about the way my military training was screaming at me that we were dealing with something that hunted like a coordinated enemy unit. But how do you tell your family that monsters are real? Just promise me, I said. Please. They promised, but I could see the doubt in their eyes. They thought I was overreacting, maybe having some kind of breakdown. I couldn't blame them. A week ago, I would have thought the same thing. The next morning brought Mord, Temple. I heard the growl behind me a split second before I spun around. One of them was standing in the passage, blocking my exit. In the beam of my flashlight, I could see it clearly for the first time. It was massive, maybe 7 feet tall and covered in coarse black fur. Its head was a nightmare fusion of human and wolf. A human skull, stretched and elongated, with wolf ears and a muzzle full of teeth. But it was the eyes that terrified me most. They were intelligent, aware, and filled with a hunger that was more than just physical. It spoke. You should not have come here, it said in a voice like gravel scraping over stone. The words were clear, unmistakably human speech, but coming from that impossible throat. I fumbled for my gun, but it was already moving. Not toward me, but to the side, cutting off my escape route. As it moved, I heard more growls from the darkness behind me. I was surrounded. We have watched you, Ranger, the creature said. You have been tracking us, learning our ways. You are smart for a human, but you are also foolish. What do you want? I managed to ask. This is our territory, our hunting ground. The humans who come here are our prey, just as the deer and the rabbits are yours. But you are different. You have the scent of a hunter, a killer. You have taken life before. Vietnam. Somehow it could smell the war on me. We offer you a choice, it continued. Join us, and we will spare your family. Refuse, and we will hunt them, as we have hunted the others. The other creatures moved closer, their eyes glowing in my flashlight beam. There were at least 6 of them, all watching me with that same terrible intelligence. I need time to think, I said. The creature that had spoken, the Alpha, I realized, tilted its head. You have until the moon is full, 3 days. Then we will have your answer. They let me go. I walked out of that cave with my heart pounding and my hands shaking, knowing that I was alive only because they'd chosen to let me live. For now. But as I hiked back toward my truck, I could hear them following me, staying just out of sight, but always there. They were making sure I knew I was being watched. The hunt had begun. I didn't sleep for the next 2 nights. I sat in my living room with my rifle across my lap, watching the windows and listening for any sound that didn't belong. Jenny and Tommy thought I was having a breakdown, and maybe I was. But I was also the only thing standing between my family and those creatures. On the second night, they came to test me. I was dozing in my chair when I heard scratching at the back door. Not the random scratching of an animal, but deliberate, rhythmic, like someone tapping out a code. I grabbed my rifle and crept to the kitchen window. The backyard was empty, but I could see gouges in the door frame where claws had tested the wood. They were checking our defenses, seeing how we'd respond. Then I heard Tommy scream. I ran upstairs to find him standing at his bedroom window, staring out at the tree line. There's something out there, he whispered. Something big. I looked where he was pointing and saw them. 3 shapes standing just inside the forest, barely visible in the darkness. They weren't hiding. They wanted us to see them. A message. We can reach you anytime we want. Get away from the window, I said, pulling Tommy back. Mark, what are those things? I wanted to lie, to tell him they were just animals. But he deserved the truth. I don't know exactly what they are, but they're hunting us. Jenny appeared in the doorway, drawn by our voices. She saw the fear in my eyes and immediately understood that this wasn't my imagination. What do? We get out of here, now. We packed quickly and quietly, taking only what Walmart needed. I had a friend in Little Rock who could put us up for a few days while I figured out what to do. But as we loaded the truck, I could feel them watching us from the darkness. The drive to Little Rock was the longest 2 hours of my life. Every shadow on the road looked like a creature waiting to attack. But we made it safely, and I got Jenny and Tommy settled in at my friend's house. I have to go back, I told Jenny. No, you don't. Call the state police. Call the FBI. Call somebody else. And tell them what? That werewolves are killing hunters? They'll lock me up. Then we'll move. We'll go somewhere else. Start over. I kissed her forehead. They'll follow us. These things, they're not just animals. They're intelligent, organized. They made it personal when they threatened you and Tommy. The only way to stop them is to kill them. She cried, but she understood. I was a soldier, and this was war. I drove back to the forest alone, armed with everything I could carry. My service rifle, loaded with silver bullets I'd had specially made. My sidearm, also loaded with silver. Explosives I'd borrowed from the Forest Service demolition supplies. And a plan. The creatures were expecting me. I could feel their presence as soon as I entered the woods. They were out there, watching, waiting. But they didn't attack. They wanted me to come to them, to face them on their terms. I hiked to the valley where their den was located. The sun was setting, painting the sky blood red. Perfect timing for what I had planned. I found the Alpha waiting for me at the cave entrance. It was bigger than I remembered, more massive, more wrong. But it was alone. You have come to give us your answer, it said. I have. And I raised my rifle. Go to hell. The silver bullet caught it in the chest, spinning it around. It roared in pain and rage, a sound that echoed through the valley, but it didn't go down. Instead, it began to change. The transformation was horrifying to watch. Its body swelled and shifted, becoming more wolf-like but retaining human intelligence. Its wounds healed as I watched, the silver bullet pushed out by regenerating tissue. Silver slows us, it growled, but it does not kill us. Nothing kills us. The rest of the pack emerged from the cave surrounding me. I counted 8 of them, all bigger and more savage-looking than their leader. I was outnumbered and outgunned, but I had one advantage they didn't know about. "You're right," I said. "Silver doesn't kill you, but explosives sure as hell will." I pulled the pin on the grenade I'd been hiding behind my back and tossed it into the cave entrance. The creatures realized what was happening a split second too late. The explosion shook the entire valley. The cave entrance collapsed, sealing the main den. But the creatures outside were still alive, still dangerous, and now they were angry. The Alpha launched itself at me, moving faster than anything that size should be able to move. I got off 2 more shots before it hit me, driving me to the ground. Its claws raked across my chest, tearing through my jacket and into the flesh beneath. I rolled away and came up firing, putting 3 silver bullets into its torso. It staggered but kept coming. Behind it, the rest of the pack was closing in. I ran. The chase through the forest was a nightmare of snapping jaws and grasping claws. They were faster than me, stronger than me, and they knew these woods better than I did. But I had a destination in mind, a place where I could make my last stand. I reached the old fire tower just as the pack caught up with me. The wooden structure was about 30 feet tall, built on a rocky outcrop that gave me a clear view of the surrounding forest. I climbed as fast as I could, using my good hand and my prosthetic to pull myself up the ladder. The creatures followed, their claws scraping against the wood. I reached the top platform and turned to face them, my rifle ready. The Alpha jet as first up the ladder. I put a bullet between its eyes, and this time it went down and stayed down. The silver must have finally reached something vital. The others kept coming. I shot. 3 more before my rifle ran empty, then switched to my sidearm. The platform was slick with blood, theirs and mine. My chest was on fire from the claw wounds, and I could feel myself getting weaker. But I kept shooting. The last creature was smaller than the others, younger maybe. It reached the platform just as I fired my last bullet. The shot caught it in the throat, and it toppled backward, crashing through the wooden railings to the ground below. I stood there in the darkness, surrounded by bodies, waiting for more of them to come. But the forest was silent. The pack was dead. Or so I thought. I woke up in the hospital 3 days later. A search team had found me unconscious on the fire tower, surrounded by what the official report called the remains of several large, unidentified animals. The doctor said I'd lost a lot of blood from the claw wounds, but I'd live. Jenny and Tommy were there when I opened my eyes. They looked relieved, but also scared. I could see the questions in their eyes, but they didn't ask them. Not yet. "The attacks have stopped," Jenny said quietly. "No more reports of missing hunters. Whatever you did, it worked." I nodded, but I wasn't so sure. I'd killed the pack, but these creatures had been in the Ozark Mountains for a long time. There might be others in different territories, and the wounds on my chest were healing strangely, too fast, with an odd tingling sensation. The Forest Service gave me a commendation for eliminating a dangerous predator threat. The official story was that I'd tracked and killed a pack of unusually large, aggressive wolves that had developed a taste for human flesh, close enough to the truth to satisfy the bureaucrats. But I knew the real truth, and I knew it wasn't over. A week after I got out of the hospital, I was shaving when I noticed something wrong with my reflection. My eyes looked different, not quite human anymore, and my teeth seemed sharper, more pointed. I'd been infected. The research I've done since then has confirmed my worst fears. The creatures I fought weren't just animals or even mutated wolves. They were humans, transformed by some kind of curse or disease that changed them into something between man and beast. And now I'm becoming one of them. I have maybe 6 months before the transformation is complete. 6 months to find a cure, if one exists. 6 months to prepare for what I might become. I've moved Jenny and Tommy to a safe house in California. They think I'm staying behind to finish up some paperwork, but really, I'm protecting them from what I'm becoming. If I can't find a cure, if I can't stop this thing that's happening to me, then I need to be far away from the people I love. I've also started training other rangers, teaching them what to look for, how to recognize the signs. Because I know now that the pack I killed wasn't the only one. There are others out there, in different forests, different mountains, and someday, someone else will have to face them. The hunger is getting stronger. I find myself staring at raw meat in the grocery store, salivating at the smell of blood. My hearing is getting sharper, my sense of smell more acute, and sometimes, late at night, I catch myself howling at the moon. But I'm still human, still Mark Redfield, the ranger who protects these woods. And I'll keep fighting this thing inside me for as long as I can. Because if I don't, if I let it win, then the pack will have new leadership. And next time, they might not make the same mistakes. The hunt never really ends. It just changes hunters. And somewhere in the darkness of the Ozark Mountains, something is still watching, still waiting, still hungry. I can feel it calling to me. My name is William Thornridge, but everyone calls me Bill. I've been a ranger at Olympic National Park for 21 years, and I've seen just about everything these woods can throw at you. Bears, cougars, lost hikers, flash floods, you name it. But what happened in September of 1963 changed everything I thought I knew about the wilderness I'd spent my life protecting. I was 44 then, getting ready to retire and finally spend time with my grandkids in Seattle. My wife Sarah had been gone 5 years, and the loneliness was getting harder to bear. The forest had always been my refuge, but lately, even the towering Douglas firs and ancient cedars couldn't quiet the ache in my chest. That Tuesday morning started like any other. I was checking my gear in the ranger station when the radio crackled to life. "Bill, we've got a situation. Research team's gone missing in the Hoh River Valley." Dr. Harrison's team had been studying old-growth forest ecosystems for the University of Washington. 5 scientists, all experienced outdoorsmen, had set up camp 3 days ago near the river's bend. They were supposed to check in daily, but we'd heard nothing since Monday morning. I knew that area like the back of my hand. The Hoh Valley was special, a temperate rainforest where some trees had stood for over 1,000 years. The canopy was so thick that even at noon it felt like twilight down below. Sound got swallowed up by the moss-covered ground, and the silence could be unsettling if you weren't used to it. I loaded my pack with standard search and rescue gear, first aid kit, rope, flares, emergency rations. The white streak in my hair, a souvenir from a lightning strike 10 years back, caught my reflection in the truck window. That strike had left my left arm weak, but I'd learned to work around it. The drive to the trailhead took an hour on winding forest roads. As I walked deeper into the valley, something felt off. The usual sounds were wrong. No bird calls, no rustling of small animals. Even the stream seemed quieter than normal. I found their camp intact near the river. Too intact. Coffee was still warm in metal cups sitting on the makeshift table. Sleeping bags were neatly arranged, equipment carefully organized. But no people. "Hello," I called out. "Dr. Harrison." My voice echoed strangely in the thick air, then died away. I checked the surrounding area for any signs of struggle. Nothing. It was like they'd simply vanished into thin air. Then I found the tape recorder. Dr. Harrison's voice came through the small speaker, excited but calm. Day 3 observations. We've discovered something remarkable. The forest ecosystem here shows signs of management, deliberate arrangement. Trees moved, rocks positioned in patterns. It's magnificent, so intelligent. "Sarah, are you getting this down?" The recording ended abruptly. I rewound it and played it again. The excitement in his voice was clear, but there was something else, an awe that bordered on reverence. I was about to radio for backup when I saw it. Next to the stream, pressed deep into the soft mud, was a handprint, but not human. It was massive, 14 inches from palm to fingertip with thick, powerful fingers. The thumb was opposable, like a human's, but the proportions were all wrong. Too big, too strong. A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the cool forest air. In 21 years of ranger work, I'd never seen anything like it. Something was watching me. I could feel it, that prickly sensation you get when eyes are on you. I spun around, scanning the tree line, but saw nothing except the endless green shadows of the ancient forest. The silence pressed in around me like a living thing. I spent the next hour searching the immediate area, following Stander. D protocols. The research team's equipment told a story that made no sense. Their instruments showed electromagnetic readings that spiked and dipped in patterns I'd never seen. Most disturbing, their planned route on the map had been abandoned. Instead, they'd headed deep into restricted territory, areas where even experienced rangers rarely ventured. The tracks were easier to follow than they should have been. 5 sets of boot prints, all heading in the same direction, but they moved in a strange way. Not scattered like people walking naturally, but in single file, like they were following something. Or someone. The trail led me deeper into the valley, where the trees grew so massive that 3 men couldn't wrap their arms around the trunks. Here, the forest floor was carpeted with moss so thick it swallowed sound completely. My footsteps made no noise at all. That's when I heard the knocking. 3 sharp raps echoed through the trees, followed by 2 more. Then silence. I stopped, listening. The sound came again, from a different direction. Deliberate, rhythmic, like a code. I'd been a logger before becoming a ranger, and I knew the sounds of the forest. This wasn't a woodpecker or a tree branch hitting another tree. This was something else, something intelligent. The boot prints led to a clearing where the canopy opened up enough to let actual sunlight through. In the center stood a structure that made my breath catch in my throat. It was a shelter, but not made by human hands. Massive logs, some weighing hundreds of pounds, had been arranged in a complex pattern. The construction was crude but purposeful, and it would have taken tremendous strength to move those logs into place. Inside the shelter, I found more evidence of the research team. Dr. Harrison's notebook, filled with sketches and observations. The final entry was dated yesterday. The subject appears to be highly intelligent. Tool use confirmed. Emotional responses suggest complex inner life. We believe communication is possible. Sarah feels we're on the verge of a breakthrough. It's been watching us for days, learning our routines, studying our behavior. Tonight we make contact. A branch snapped behind me. I spun around, my hand instinctively reaching for the radio on my belt. But what I saw made me freeze. It stood about 50 yards away, partially hidden behind a massive cedar. 9 feet tall, maybe 10. Covered in dark hair that seemed to absorb the filtered sunlight. Its face was more human than ape, with intelligent eyes that watched me with unmistakable curiosity. We stared at each other for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. Then slowly, it raised one massive hand. Not threatening, but almost greeting. A wave of emotion hit me that wasn't my own. Loneliness, curiosity, and something else, a deep, aching sadness that reminded me of my own grief over Sarah's death. The creature took a step forward, and I saw it clearly. Its movements were graceful despite its enormous size. The muscles beneath its hair rippled with controlled power. But it was the eyes that held me. They were ancient, wise, and unbearably sad. "Easy," I whispered, though I wasn't sure if I was talking to it or to myself. It tilted its head at the sound of my voice, and I felt another wave of emotion. This time, it was recognition. It knew I was different from the others who had come before. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, it melted back into the forest. One moment it was there, the next it was gone, leaving only the faint impression of its presence and the lingering scent of musk and earth. I stood alone in the clearing, my heart pounding. Every instinct told me to run, to radio for help, to get as far away as possible. But something held me there. The same feeling I'd had when I first saw these ancient trees, a sense of standing in the presence of something sacred. The notebook was still in my hands. I flipped through more pages, finding detailed observations about the creature's behavior. The team hadn't been captured. They'd been studying it, learning from it, and it had been learning from them. As I walked back toward the main trail, I felt eyes on me again. But this time, I wasn't afraid. I was beginning to understand that whatever this creature was, it wasn't a monster. It was just desperately, impossibly alone. I didn't sleep that night. Back at the ranger station, I sat staring at Dr. Harrison's notebook, trying to make sense of what I'd seen. The sketches were detailed and scientific, measurements, behavioral observations, even attempts at communication through gestures and sounds. But it was the personal notes that unsettled me most. Day 6. The subject shows signs of grief. When Sarah played recordings of our children laughing, it became visibly distressed. We believe it may be the last of its kind. Day 8. Intelligence confirmed beyond doubt. It brought us food, berries, and roots it had gathered. The arrangement was deliberate, almost ritualistic. It's trying to care for us. Day 10. We've established basic communication, hand signals, simple gestures. It understands more than we initially thought. Tonight, it's leading us to something important. The final entry was yesterday's date. Whatever had happened to the team, it had happened recently. I decided to go back. The hike to the valley took on a different quality in the pre-dawn darkness. My flashlight beam seemed swallowed by the massive trees, and every shadow could hide something watching. But I pressed on, driven by a need to understand. The creature's shelter was empty when I arrived, but I found something new. Arranged on a flat rock were 5 small objects: a pen, a compass, a hair ribbon, a pair of glasses, and a small leather journal. Personal items from the research team, carefully arranged like offerings. I picked up the journal and recognized Dr. Harrison's handwriting. We were wrong about so much. It's not just intelligent, it's wise, ancient. It's been watching our species for longer than we can imagine, trying to understand us the way we're trying to understand it. The sadness Sarah sensed isn't just loneliness. It's mourning. Its people are gone, and it's the last guardian of something we can barely comprehend. Footsteps approached through the moss. Not the heavy, deliberate steps of the creature, but human steps. I looked up to see Dr. Harrison walking into the clearing. He looked different, calmer. His usual nervous energy was gone, replaced by a serenity I'd never seen in him before. Behind him came the other team members, walking in single file. "Bill," he said, his voice soft but clear, "I'm glad you found us." "Dr. Harrison, are you all right? We've been looking for you." He smiled, but there was something distant in his eyes. "We're fine. Better than fine. We've learned so much. Your radio's been silent for 3 days. People are worried." "Time moves differently here," said Sarah, the team's anthropologist. "We've been studying, learning. It's been teaching us." "Teaching you what?" Before anyone could answer, the creature stepped out from behind the massive cedar. In daylight, it was even more impressive. Its hair was dark brown, almost black, and its face showed an intelligence that was unmistakably human-like. But it was the eyes that captured me, ancient, knowing, and infinitely sad. The team members didn't seem afraid. If anything, they moved closer to it, like children seeking comfort from a parent. "It's been alone for so long," Dr. Harrison explained. "Decades, maybe centuries. It's been waiting for someone who could understand." The creature looked at me and took a step forward. I felt that wave of emotion again, curiosity, hope, and underneath it all, a loneliness so profound it nearly brought me to my knees. "You don't understand," I said. "There are search teams coming, military. They know something's out here." Dr. Harrison's expression changed. "How long do we have?" "Maybe a day, maybe less." The creature made a sound, low, mournful, like a whale song. The research team gathered around it, their faces full of concern and protectiveness. "We can't let them find it," Sarah said firmly. "They'll capture it, study it, turn it into a specimen. It's not an animal, it's a person. A person who's been protecting these forests for longer than our civilization has existed," Dr. Harrison added. "The native peoples knew. The Quinault, the Makah. Their stories about the Siatko weren't myths. They were history." The creature approached me slowly, its massive hands held out in a gesture of peace. When it was close enough, it placed one enormous palm on my chest. The contact was electric. Suddenly, I wasn't standing in the clearing anymore. I was seeing through its eyes. Decades of watching humans enter its domain. Loggers in the 1920s, terrified by glimpses of something massive moving through the trees. Researchers in the 1950s, getting close to the truth before being driven away by their own fear. And now, these 5 people who had finally understood. I saw myself through its perception. A man carrying deep sadness. Someone who understood loss and solitude. It recognized a kindred spirit. When the vision ended, I was back in the clearing, but everything had changed. The creature wasn't a monster or a mystery anymore. It was just someone who had been alone for far too long, finally finding others who could see it for what it truly was. "We have to protect it," I heard myself saying. The creature's eyes met mine, and I felt its gratitude wash over me like warm sunlight. The sound of helicopters reached us before noon, 2 military choppers circling the valley like mechanical vultures. I watched from the hidden cave the creature had shown us, a natural formation deep in the hillside where it had lived for decades. The cave was remarkable. The walls were covered with simple drawings, stick figures representing humans, animals, and in the center, a large figure that could only be the creature itself. Some of the drawings looked old, maybe decades old. Others were recent, showing the research team. Dr. Harrison was studying the cave paintings with wonder. "It's been documenting contact with humans for years. Look at this one. It shows men with axes, probably the old logging crews. And this one shows soldiers." "World War II, I said, recognizing the helmets in the crude drawings. "There were military exercises in these woods." The creature made a soft sound and touched one of the older drawings. Through its gestures, I understood it was trying to tell us something important. These weren't just records, they were warnings. Every time humans got too close to the truth, something bad happened. The military's been looking for it for 20 years, I realized. Every time someone reports a sighting, they investigate. They want to capture it. Sarah looked up from her notes. "It's not just curiosity. Think about what this represents. A species that's survived in secret for centuries. The military applications alone." The helicopter sounds grew closer. Through the cave entrance, I could see armed men rappelling down ropes, setting up a perimeter around the valley. They moved with the precision of a unit that had done this before. "They're not just looking," I said. "They're hunting." The creature understood. It stood to its full height, nearly 10 feet tall in the cave, and made a decision. With gentle but firm gestures, it indicated that the research team should stay hidden while it dealt with the threat. "No," Dr. Harrison said firmly. "We won't let you face them alone." But the creature was already moving toward the cave entrance. I followed, my ranger training kicking in. If there was going to be trouble, I needed to be there. The confrontation happened in the same clearing where I'd first seen the creature. A dozen soldiers in camouflage, armed with tranquilizer guns and net launchers. Their leader, a colonel with cold eyes, was barking orders into his radio. The creature stepped into the clearing like it owned it, which, in a way, it did. The soldiers raised their weapons, but something strange happened. One by one, they began to lower them. The creature's presence was overwhelming, not threatening, but so ancient and wise that it commanded respect without effort. "Stand down," the colonel ordered, but his voice was uncertain. The creature approached him slowly, its massive hands held out in a gesture of peace, but the colonel's training overrode his instincts. He raised his tranquilizer gun. "Don't," I said, stepping into the clearing. "It's not what you think. Stand aside, Ranger. This is military business. This is my forest, my jurisdiction, and that's not an animal you're hunting." The creature looked at me, and I felt its gratitude, but also its resignation. It had been through this before, and it knew how it would end. That's when Dr. Harrison and his team emerged from the cave. They stood between the creature and the soldiers, forming a human shield. "You'll have to go through us," Dr. Harrison said. The colonel's face hardened. "You've been compromised. Stand down or face charges." "Compromised?" Sarah laughed bitterly. "We've been enlightened. Do you have any idea what you're trying to destroy? The creature made a sound, low, mournful, like a song of goodbye. It was giving up. After decades of hiding, it was ready to sacrifice itself to protect the humans who had finally understood it. But I wasn't ready to let that happen. "Colonel," I said, stepping forward, "I'm the senior ranger in this district. I'm ordering you to stand down. You have no authority here. I have something better. I have the truth." I pulled out Dr. Harrison's notebook and began reading aloud. The scientific observations, the evidence of intelligence, the proof that this wasn't just an animal, but a thinking, feeling being with rights. As I read, something changed in the soldiers' faces. The creature's presence was affecting them all, projecting emotions of peace and understanding. Several of them lowered their weapons entirely. "It's the last of its kind," I continued. "It's been protecting these forests for longer than we've been a nation. It's not a threat, it's a guardian." The colonel's hand shook as he aimed his weapon. "I have orders." "Then you'll have to shoot me first." The creature moved with impossible speed. One moment it was standing behind us. The next it was between me and the colonel, its massive hand gently pushing the tranquilizer gun aside. It looked directly into the colonel's eyes, and I saw the moment everything changed. The colonel's face went from determination to wonder to something approaching reverence. "Dear God," he whispered, "what are you?" The creature's response was a wave of emotion so powerful it brought tears to my eyes. It was sharing its story, centuries of solitude, watching our species grow and change, hoping someday we might be ready to understand. One by one, the soldiers lowered their weapons. The creature's presence filled the clearing with a sense of peace so profound that violence seemed impossible. The colonel spoke into his radio with a shaky voice. "Mission abort. Repeat, mission abort. No target found." As the military team retreated, the creature turned to me with what I can only describe as a smile. The official report stated that the research team had been found safe but disoriented after getting lost in the forest. No mention was made of unusual discoveries. The area was quietly designated as a restricted research zone, off limits to the public. I was forced into early retirement for psychological stress and compromised judgment. The official story was that I'd suffered a breakdown while searching for the missing team. My pension came with the understanding that I would never speak publicly about what happened in the Ho Valley. But that was fine by me. Some secrets are worth keeping. The research team made a different choice. Officially, they returned to the university and published papers on old-growth forest ecosystems. Unofficially, they continued their real work, studying and protecting the last member of a species that had shared our world in secret for millennia. Dr. Harrison visits me sometimes at my cabin near the park boundary. We don't talk much about what happened, but we both understand our roles as guardians of something precious. I still go into the forest regularly. The creature and I have developed our own form of communication. Simple gestures, shared emotions, a deep understanding that transcends words. It's taught me things about the forest that no ranger manual could contain. I've learned to read the land like a book, to understand the connections between all living things. The loneliness that had consumed me since Sarah's death has faded. It's hard to feel alone when you're connected to something so ancient and wise. The creature has given me a purpose beyond my own grief, protecting not just the forest, but the last living link to a world that existed before humans claimed dominion over everything. Sometimes I catch glimpses of other rangers or hikers who ventured too deep into the restricted areas. They emerge with stories of feeling watched, of finding strange arrangements of stones or bent trees. I do my best to steer them away, to protect both them and the creature they've almost discovered. The creature is aging. I can see it in the way it moves, the silver creeping into its dark hair. It's lived for centuries, but even its kind can't live forever. Sometimes I wonder what will happen when it's gone, if there will be anyone left to remember what the forests were like when they had a guardian. But then I think about the cave paintings, the careful records it's kept of every human contact. Maybe its purpose isn't just to guard the forest, but to wait for the day when our species is ready to understand what we've lost and what we might still save. On quiet nights, when the fog rolls in from the Pacific and the ancient trees stand like sentinels in the darkness, I sometimes hear the knocking sounds echoing through the valley. 3 sharp raps, followed by 2 more. A greeting, a recognition, a promise that some things endure. I'm 62 now, and my replacement as guardian will need to be found soon. I've been watching the younger rangers looking for someone with the right combination of wisdom and wonder. Someone who can keep the secret and understand its importance. The creature still visits me, usually at dawn when the forest is quiet and the world feels full of possibilities. We sit together in comfortable silence, 2 old beings who've found peace in protecting something larger than themselves. Yesterday, it brought me a gift, a small wooden carving, crude but beautiful, of a human figure standing beside a much larger one. Both figures had their arms raised toward the sky, as if greeting the morning sun. I keep the carving on my mantle, next to a picture of Sarah and my grandchildren. It reminds me that sometimes the most important relationships are the ones that can't be explained, only felt. The giant's domain remains safe, hidden in the heart of the Olympic wilderness. And as long as I draw breath, it will stay that way. Some guardians carry guns or wear badges. Others simply understand that the greatest mysteries are worth protecting, even if the world isn't ready to believe in them. The forest keeps its secrets, and I keep mine. My name is Rebecca Nightfall, but everyone calls me Becca. I've been a ranger at Yellowstone for 9 years now, and I thought I'd seen everything this place could throw at me. Boiling pools that can cook you alive in seconds, tourists who think they can pet bison, and enough sulfur gas to choke a horse. But nothing prepared me for what happened in October of 1979. I should tell you about my eyes first, because it matters later. I was born with heterochromia, 1 blue eye, 1 green. Most people think it's cool, but it plays tricks on me sometimes, especially in low light. Depth perception gets weird. Maybe that's why I missed the signs at first. I'm a geologist by training, got my PhD before I came here. I study the thermal features, the hot springs, geysers, all the underground plumbing that makes this place so special. My ex-husband used to say I cared more about rocks than people. He wasn't wrong, but that's what made me good at my job. Rocks don't lie. They don't hurt you. They just tell you their story if you know how to listen. The morning everything started, I was checking the temperature readings at Grand Prismatic Spring. It's the big rainbow one you see on all the postcards, about 200 feet across. Beautiful blues and greens in the center where it's hottest. Yellows and oranges around the edges where it cools down. The bacteria create the colors. Simple science. I was crouched down next to my equipment when I noticed something wrong. The mineral deposits around the spring's edge looked different. Not the usual buildup pattern. Instead, there were these perfect shadow shapes pressed into the white limestone, like someone had laid down and left an impression, but backwards. Dark where it should be light. Weird, I muttered, taking some photos. I'd never seen anything like it in 9 years of studying thermal features. That's when I heard the voices. Has anyone seen the Morrison family? I looked up to see another ranger, Jim Cowell, talking to a small group of tourists. They were all shaking their heads, looking concerned. They were just here, an elderly woman said, taking pictures by the spring. Their little girl was so excited about the colors. I stood up, brushing dirt off my knees. What's the problem? Jim walked over, his face tight with worry. Family of 4, parents and 2 kids. They were here an hour ago, but now their car's still in the parking lot and nobody's seen them. Maybe they went to see another feature. That's what I thought, but look at this. He held up a small camera. Found it right here by the spring, still had film in it. I took the camera, a simple point and shoot. Did you develop it? Yeah, back at the station. The photos are strange. The way he said it made my skin crawl. Jim had been here longer than me. He didn't use words like strange, unless something was really wrong. What kind of strange? You need to see for yourself. But first, help me look around. Family doesn't just vanish. We spent the next 2 hours searching. The Morrison family had simply disappeared. Their footprints led right up to the edge of Grand Prismatic, then stopped. Not turned around, not wandered off, just stopped, like they'd walked into thin air. Back at the ranger station, Jim showed me the photos. The first few were normal. Family shots, kids pointing at the colorful spring, parents smiling. But the last three made my blood run cold. In the first strange photo, the family was standing together, but their shadows were wrong. Instead of falling behind them like they should, the shadows were stretched out in front, reaching toward the spring. In the second photo, the shadows had detached completely. 4 dark shapes stood separate from the family, like they were looking at each other. In the third and final photo, the shadows were gone entirely. The family stood in bright sunlight with no shadows at all, and their faces showed pure terror. Has to be a double exposure, I said. But my voice sounded weak even to me. Or some kind of film defect. Jim nodded, but I could see he didn't believe it either. That's what I told myself. But then I found these. He pulled out a small tape recorder. The little girl had this, still running when I found it. He pressed play. At first, just normal sounds. Wind, bubbling water, family chatter. Then a child's voice, high and scared. "Mommy, why is my shadow walking away?" A woman's voice, confused. "What do you mean, honey?" "Look, it's moving by itself." Then screaming. Not the angry scream of a hurt child, but pure terror, the kind that makes your bones ache. After that, just silence and the sound of bubbling water. I stared at the tape recorder, my hands shaking. This has to be a joke, some kind of prank. 4 people don't just disappear as a prank, Becca. And look at this. He led me to a map of the thermal basin. Red pins marked where the family had been seen. The pattern was strange. They'd visited every major thermal feature in a perfect circle around Grand Prismatic, like they were being led somewhere. Their car keys were on the ground next to the spring, Jim said, along with the mom's purse. Everything else is gone. I looked at the photos again. In the harsh light of the ranger station, they seemed even more impossible. Shadows don't move on their own. People don't just lose their shadows. But the fear on those faces was real. "I need to go back out there," I said. "Check the area again." "Want me to come with you?" I shook my head. "I work better alone. You know that." Jim nodded, but I could see the worry in his eyes. "Be careful, Becca. Something's not right about this whole thing." As I walked back toward Grand Prismatic, the October sun was already getting low. The thermal features looked different in the slanted light, more mysterious, more threatening. Steam rose from dozens of pools, creating a maze of white clouds that drifted across the landscape. I kept thinking about those photos, about the way the shadows had moved, about the terror in that little girl's voice. Rocks don't lie, I told myself. There's a scientific explanation for everything. But as I approached the spring, I noticed something that made my scientific certainty crumble. My shadow, the one that should have been trailing behind me in the afternoon sun, was walking beside me instead, and it was looking right at me. I stopped dead in my tracks, staring down at my shadow. It stopped too, but a half-second later, like it was copying me instead of being cast by me. In the dim light, my mismatched eyes were playing tricks on me. Had to be. I raised my right hand, my shadow raised its left hand. That's when I knew something was very, very wrong. I backed away from Grand Prismatic, my heart hammering. The shadow moved with me, but it was still wrong, still delayed, still backwards. I fumbled for my radio. "Jim, this is Becca. I need you to come out here. Now!" Static crackled back. "What's wrong? You sound scared." "Just come, and bring a camera. Something's happening with the shadows." "The shadows?" "Becca, you're not making sense." "Please, Jim, just trust me." While I waited, I tried to stay calm. I pulled out my notebook and started documenting everything I could observe. Temperature readings, wind direction, exact time. All the normal things that kept me grounded in reality. The sulfur smell was stronger than usual. The bubbling sounds from the spring seemed louder, more urgent. And everywhere I looked, shadows were behaving strangely. A dead tree's shadow bent the wrong way. A rock's shadow was too dark, too deep. Jim arrived 20 minutes later, out of breath from hurrying. "What's going on?" I pointed to my feet. "Look at my shadow." He looked down, then up at me, confused. "It looks normal." "What?" I looked down too. My shadow was perfectly normal, falling behind me where it should be. But it was moving wrong. "Becca, when's the last time you slept? You've been working 16-hour days since the divorce." Maybe he was right. Maybe I was just tired, stressed, seeing things that weren't there. But then I remembered the photos, the tape recording, the missing family. "Jim, I think we need to close this area. Something's not safe here." "Based on what? Some weird photos and you thinking your shadow moved?" Before I could answer, we heard screaming. It came from the direction of the parking lot. High, terrified shrieks that echoed across the thermal basin. We ran toward the sound, splashing through shallow thermal runoff, dodging steam vents. In the parking lot, we found a young couple standing next to their car. The woman was screaming, pointing at the ground. The man was trying to calm her down, but his face was pale with shock. "What's wrong?" Jim called out as we approached. The woman turned to us, tears streaming down her face. "Our shadows. Look at our shadows." I looked down at where she was pointing. The couple stood in full sunlight, but they cast no shadows at all. None. Just bare asphalt where their shadows should have been. "That's impossible," Jim whispered. The man grabbed my arm. "You're a ranger, right? You have to help us. Something took our shadows. We were taking pictures by that big rainbow spring, and something came out of the water. It looked like a person, but it was made of darkness. It touched our shadows, and they just came off, like peeling a sticker." "Where are they now?" I asked, though I was afraid of the answer. "They walked away," the woman sobbed. "They walked away from us, toward the spring. Our own shadows abandoned us." Jim was already on his radio, calling for backup, for supervisors, for anyone who might know what to do. But I was thinking about the photos of the Morrison family, about the shadow shapes pressed into the limestone, about the way my own shadow had been acting. "We need to get you to a hospital," I told the couple. "You might be suffering from gas poisoning. The thermal features release hydrogen sulfide, and it can cause hallucinations." I was trying to convince myself as much as them. But as I spoke, I noticed something terrible. The couple's skin was getting paler, not just pale, gray, like they were fading away. "I don't feel good," the man said. "I feel empty." His wife collapsed, just fell to her knees, staring at nothing. Her breathing was shallow, rapid. When I checked her pulse, it was weak and getting weaker. "We need an ambulance," I told Jim. "Now." But even as he made the call, I knew we were too late. The woman's eyes were turning glassy. The man sat down heavily beside her, his movements slow and disconnected. "What's happening to us?" he asked. I didn't know what to tell him. In all my years of studying Yellowstone, I'd never seen anything like this. People didn't just lose their shadows. People didn't fade away because of missing shadows. But they were dying. Right in front of us, they were dying. The ambulance arrived 30 minutes later, but it was too late. The couple had simply stopped. No heart attack, no obvious cause of death. They'd just faded away until there was nothing left. As the paramedics worked uselessly over the bodies, I walked back toward Grand Prismatic. The sun was setting now, and the thermal features looked different in the twilight, more alive, more dangerous. That's when I saw it. A shape moved across the surface of the spring, not in the water, on the water. A dark silhouette that looked human, but wasn't. It glided across the colorful surface like it was solid ground, leaving ripples in its wake. As I watched, frozen with terror, it turned toward me. Where its face should have been, there was only darkness, not black, darker than black, an absence of light that hurt to look at. It raised one arm and I saw two shapes detach from the thermal deposits around the spring. Two dark figures that walked with familiar gaits. the shadows of the dead couple. Now, puppets of whatever that thing was. The creature pointed at me, and I felt something tug at my feet. I looked down to see my own shadow stretching toward the spring, pulled like taffy. The creature was calling to it, trying to tear it away from me. I ran. I ran back to the parking lot, to Jim, to the ambulance lights and radio chatter and normal human activity. Behind me I could hear something following. Not footsteps, something else, like the sound of darkness moving. "Jim!" I screamed. "Something's in the water! Something's killing people!" He looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. But as we drove away from Grand Prismatic, I saw more shapes moving in the steam. Dark figures that had once been human, now dancing around the thermal features like they were celebrating. Back at the ranger station, I tried to explain what I'd seen. Jim listened patiently, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. The official report would say the couple died of natural causes, probably heart failure brought on by gas exposure. But I knew better. Something was hunting in Yellowstone, something that lived in the shadows and fed on human life force, something that had taken the Morrison family and would take others if I didn't figure out how to stop it. As I sat in my office writing up my report, I noticed my shadow again. It was normal now, falling naturally behind my chair. But every few minutes, it would twitch. Just a little, like it was trying to break free. I turned off all the lights except one small desk lamp. In the harsh, focused light, I cast almost no shadow at all. That's how I spent the night. Awake, afraid, and surrounded by as much light as I could manage, because I was beginning to understand that shadows weren't just the absence of light. They were something else entirely, something alive, something hungry. And now they knew I could see them. The next morning, BR brought news that made my blood run cold. 3 more people had vanished overnight. A park maintenance worker named Eddie, a night security guard, and a photographer who'd been staying at the Old Faithful Inn. All of them had last been seen near thermal features. All of them had left behind personal items and no trace of where they'd gone. I hadn't slept. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that thing gliding across Grand Prismatic, saw the dead couple's shadows walking away from their bodies. I'd spent the night in my office with every light on, drinking coffee and researching everything I could find about shadow phenomena. What I found in the park's old records made everything worse. The first report was from 1885, written by a geological survey team. They'd been mapping the thermal features when 3 team members disappeared near what we now call Grand Prismatic. The surviving team leader wrote, "The shadows of my men were seen walking the grounds for days after their disappearance, as if searching for something. We abandoned the survey and recommend this area be avoided." There were more reports. In 1923, a Crow elder named Joseph Crow Feather had warned park officials about shadow spirits that guarded the sacred waters. He said they'd been disturbed by too many people visiting the thermal features. The Park Service had dismissed his warnings as superstition. In 1934, a park photographer named Samuel Chen had documented shadow figures in dozens of photos taken around the thermal basins. His final report, filed just before his own disappearance, described seeing people made of darkness emerging from the hot springs at twilight. Every few years, people vanished, always near thermal features, always leaving no trace except strange photographs and recordings. The Park Service had covered it up, explained it away, but the pattern was clear. Something horrible had been hunting in Yellowstone for almost a century. I was reading through another report when Jim burst into my office. "Becca, we've got a problem. A big one." He looked terrible, pale, shaking like he hadn't slept either. "What's wrong?" "I went back to Grand Prismatic this morning, early, before the tourists arrived. I wanted to check the area again, look for any clues about the missing people." "And?" "I found Eddie. Sort of." My mouth went dry. "What do you mean, sort of?" "He's in the spring, under the water." "But Becca..." Jim sat down heavily in the chair across from my desk. "He's not dead. He's down there, maybe 20 feet deep, and he's moving, swimming, but he's not coming up for air. That's impossible. The water's nearly boiling." "I know, but I saw him." And there are others down there, lots of others. They're all moving around like they're alive, but they're not trying to surface. It's like they're living underwater now. I stood up, grabbing my jacket. We need to see this. Becca, I don't think we should go back there. Not alone. We should call the FBI, the military, somebody who knows how to handle this kind of thing. Handle what kind of thing? We don't even know what we're dealing with. I know what I saw. There's something down there. Something big. It moves like a person, but it's the size of a building. And all those missing people, they're not missing. They're with it. We drove to Grand Prismatic in silence. The morning sun was bright, making the thermal features look almost normal, almost safe. But I could feel something watching us as we approached the spring. There, Jim pointed to the center of the pool. Look carefully. I strained my eyes, focusing through the steam and the bright colors. At first, I saw nothing but the usual bacterial mats and mineral deposits. But then, in the deepest part of the spring, I saw movement. A human shape, definitely Eddie's stocky build, was walking along the bottom of the pool. He moved normally, like he was taking a stroll in a park, but he was 30 feet underwater in near boiling water. As I watched, he turned and looked up at us. He waved. "Oh, God," I whispered. "He's alive down there." But that wasn't the worst part. As my eyes adjusted to the strange light filtering through the water, I could see more figures. Dozens of them. Men, women, children. All walking around on the bottom of the spring like it was the most natural thing in the world. And in the center of them all, something huge and dark that my mind refused to process. It was shaped like a person, but it was massive, easily 20 feet tall. As I watched, it turned toward us, and I saw those same empty eye sockets I'd seen the night before. The Shadow Walker. And it was holding court with all the people it had taken. "We have to get them out," I said. But even as I said it, I knew it was hopeless. You can't rescue someone from the bottom of a boiling spring. "Becca, look at this." Jim was pointing to the ground around the spring. The shadow shapes I'd noticed the day before were more pronounced now. Dozens of them, pressed into the limestone like fossils. The shadows of all the missing people, somehow preserved in stone. It's keeping them, I realized. The shadows. It steals their shadows and keeps them here, and somehow that lets it control the people even when they're dead, Jim finished. Those people in the water, they're not alive. They can't be. But their shadows are trapped here, so they have to stay. A new voice interrupted us. "Excuse me, are you park rangers?" We turned to find a family of tourists approaching. A mother, father, and 2 young children. The same composition as the Morrison family that had started this whole nightmare. "You need to leave," I said quickly. "This area is closed." "But the sign says it's open," the father said. "We drove all the way from Ohio to see the Grand Prismatic Spring." "There's been a gas leak," Jim said. "Toxic fumes. Very dangerous." But even as he spoke, I noticed something wrong. The family's shadows were moving independently, sliding across the ground toward the spring. The family didn't seem to notice, but their shadows were already being pulled away from them. "Run," I shouted. "Get away from here. Now." The family looked at me like I was crazy, but something in my voice must have convinced them. They started backing away, but it was too late. Their shadows had reached the edge of the spring, and I could see the dark shape under the water rising toward the surface. The Shadow Walker broke through the colorful surface of the spring like a breaching whale. Water cascaded off its impossible form as it rose to its full height. Up close, it was even more terrifying. Not just dark, but a complete absence of light. A hole, in reality, shaped like a person. The family screamed and ran, but their shadows stayed behind. 4 dark shapes now stood at the edge of the spring, perfectly still, waiting for orders. The Shadow Walker looked at me, and when it spoke, its voice was like the sound of wind through empty caves. "You can see me. You can see between the worlds. That makes you valuable." "What are you?" I managed to ask. "I am the guardian of the threshold, the keeper of the space between light and dark. Your people opened too many doors. Now the boundaries are weak. What do you want? To restore the balance. To close the doors your kind forced open. But first, I must grow strong enough. Each shadow I take makes me more powerful. The 4 tourist shadows began walking toward the spring, and I knew that somewhere the family was dying. Their life force was being drained away as their shadows were absorbed. "Stop!" I shouted. "Take me instead. I can help you." The shadow walker tilted its head. "You would sacrifice yourself for strangers? If it means protecting innocent people, yes. Interesting. You are different from the others. Your eyes see truth. Your heart feels responsibility. Perhaps you can be useful in another way." It gestured, and the tourist shadows stopped their march to the spring. Somewhere in the distance, I heard the family's car starting up, driving away. They would live, for now. "What do you want from me?" I asked. "You will be my herald, my prophet. You will warn others to stay away from the sacred places, and when the time comes, you will help me close the doors forever." "And if I refuse?" The shadow walker smiled, though it had no mouth. "Then I will take your shadow now, and you will join my collection at the bottom of the spring. Your choice, guardian." I looked at Jim, who was staring at the creature in pure terror. I looked at the shadow shapes pressed into the limestone. I thought about all the people who had disappeared, all the families destroyed by this thing. "I'll do it," I said, "but I want something in return. Name it." "Let the people in the spring go. They're already dead. Their suffering serves no purpose." The shadow walker considered this. "Very well. But their shadows remain mine. And remember, Herald, if you betray me, I will take everyone you care about, everyone you have ever known." It sank back into the spring, and gradually the figures at the bottom stopped moving. The people were finally, truly dead. But their shadows remained, dark patches in the limestone that would never fade. Jim and I drove back to the ranger station in silence. When we got there, I wrote my report recommending that the Grand Prismatic Area be closed indefinitely due to geological instability. It was a lie, but it might save lives. That night, I sat in my office again, surrounded by lights, trying to figure out what to do. The Shadow Walker had made me its herald, but I wasn't planning to serve it. I was planning to destroy it. I just had to figure out how to kill something that lived between dimensions. Outside my window, shadows moved through the park like living things. Hunting. Wait. Ting. Growing stronger with each person they claimed. And I was the only one who could see them coming. 3 days later, I found the answer in the most unlikely place, the park's old maintenance tunnels. I'd been studying the thermal features, trying to understand how the Shadow Walker moved between them. It wasn't just living in Grand Prismatic. It was using the underground hot spring system like a highway, traveling from pool to pool through the connected cave networks. The maintenance tunnels ran parallel to some of these cave systems. If I could access them, I might be able to find where the creature was strongest, where it was most vulnerable. I went alone. Jim had been acting strange since our encounter with the Shadow Walker, jumping at shadows, refusing to go near any thermal features. I couldn't blame him, but I also couldn't wait for backup that might never come. The tunnels were narrow, cramped, and filled with pipes carrying superheated water from the springs to various park facilities. The air was thick with steam and the smell of sulfur. My flashlight beam cut through the fog, casting dancing shadows on the tunnel walls. That's when I realized I wasn't alone. The shadows in the tunnel weren't behaving like shadows should. They moved independently, flowing along the walls like liquid darkness, and they were all moving in the same direction, deeper into the tunnel system, toward the heart of the thermal basin. I followed them. The tunnel opened into a natural cave system I'd never seen before. The walls were covered in mineral deposits, but not the usual white and yellow limestone. These formations were black, smooth, almost mirror-like, and they were warm to the touch, warmer than they should have been. The cave stretched ahead of me, sloping downward into darkness. The shadow shapes flowed along the walls like a dark river, all heading toward something deeper in the cave system. I followed them for what felt like hours. The cave branched and twisted, sometimes opening into vast chambers, sometimes narrowing to crawl spaces, but always, yes, the shadows moved forward, pulling me deeper. Finally, I emerged into a chamber so large my flashlight couldn't reach the far walls. The ceiling was lost in darkness above me, and in the center of the chamber was a pool of water so black it seemed to absorb light. But it wasn't water. It was shadow, liquid shadow that moved and pulsed like a living thing. Around the pool, hundreds of shadow shapes stood in perfect rows, all the people who had disappeared over the decades, their shadows preserved and enslaved by the creature that lived in the pool. As I watched, the Shadow Walker rose from the liquid darkness. But here, in its true domain, it was different, larger, more solid, more real. "Welcome, Herald," it said, its voice echoing from the cave walls. "You have found the heart of my realm, the source of my power." "What is this place?" I asked. "A wound in reality, a place where the barriers between dimensions grow thin. Your people call it a thermal feature, but it is much more. It is a doorway." "A doorway to where?" "To the Shadow Realm, the place where darkness lives. I was once the guardian of this doorway, keeping the shadows from spilling into your world. But decades of disturbance, of people trampling sacred ground, have weakened me, changed me. I began to understand. You're not evil. You're broken." "I am dying," the Shadow Walker admitted. "The boundary between worlds grows weaker with each passing year. Soon the Shadow Realm will spill into your world entirely. Darkness will consume everything." "Then why are you stealing people's shadows? Why are you killing them?" "Because I need their life force to repair the barrier. Each shadow I take makes me stronger, more able to hold the door closed. But it is not enough. I need more." "How much more?" The Shadow Walker gestured to the rows of shadow shapes. "All of them. Every person who visits the sacred wild. Aiders, every tourist, every researcher, every ranger. Only by taking them all can I gather enough power to seal the doorway forever. That's genocide. That is survival. Your world or mine. Choose." I looked at the hundreds of shadows standing around the pool. People who had once been alive, now trapped in this nightmare realm. Families destroyed, lives cut short, all to feed this creature's desperate attempt to save both worlds. "There has to be another way," I said. "There is." The Shadow Walker's form began to shift, becoming more solid, more human-like. "You could take my place. Your eyes see between worlds. Your mind understands both science and mystery. You could become the new guardian. And what would happen to you? I would finally be allowed to die, to rest. The burden would pass to you, and you would have the power to protect both worlds without killing innocents." I stared at the creature, trying to process what it was offering. What would I have to do? "Step into the pool. Let the Shadow Realm merge with your essence. Become something between human and shadow, between light and dark. It is not death, but it is not life as you know it. And the people you've taken? Their shadows would be freed. They could finally rest in peace." I looked around the chamber, at the hundreds of trapped souls, at the liquid darkness that pulsed with alien life. The Shadow Walker was right about one thing. The barrier was weakening. I could feel it, like a pressure in my head, a sense of reality stretching thin. If I didn't do something, the Shadow Realm would eventually break through entirely. Darkness would spill into our world, consuming everything in its path. Every person in Yellowstone would die, then everyone in Wyoming, then everyone, everywhere. But if I became the new guardian, I could prevent that. I could save both worlds. "Will it hurt?" I asked. "At first, but then you will understand. You will see the beauty in darkness, the necessity of shadow. You will become something greater than human. I thought about my life. The failed marriage, and the loneliness, the way I'd always felt more comfortable with rocks than people. Maybe this was what I was meant for. Maybe this was my purpose. What about Jim? What about the other Rangers? They will remember that you died bravely trying to save the missing tourists. They will never know the truth. They will never know that you sacrificed yourself to save them all. I walked to the edge of the shadow pool. The liquid darkness was warm, almost inviting. I could feel power radiating from it, ancient and alien but not malevolent. Just different. The people in Grand Prismatic, I said. The ones walking on the bottom. Will they be freed too? Yes, all of them. They will finally be allowed to die. I took a deep breath. Then I'll do it. I stepped into the pool. The shadow liquid was warm, almost pleasant. It flowed up my legs like water, but it didn't feel wet. It felt like coming home, like finding a place I'd always belonged but never knew existed. As the darkness reached my waist, I felt my human consciousness beginning to change. I could see into the shadow realm, see the true nature of the boundary between worlds. I could feel the weight of responsibility settling on my shoulders, the burden of keeping two realities separate. The Shadow Walker was fading, its form becoming translucent. "Thank you," it whispered. "Thank you for freeing me." The darkness reached my chest, my neck, my face. As it covered my eyes, I felt my vision changing. Now I could see both worlds at once, the human world above, with its thermal features and tourist paths, and the shadow realm below, with its alien beauty and terrible power. I was no longer human. I was something else, something between. The new guardian of the threshold. The official report stated that Park Ranger Rebecca Nightfall died in a thermal cave collapse while searching for missing tourists. Her body was never recovered, but her sacrifice led to the discovery of several victims and the implementation of new safety protocols around Yellowstone's thermal features. That's what they wrote. That's what Jim believed. That's what everyone believes. But I'm still here. I exist now in the space between light and shadow, between the human world and the realm of darkness. During the day, I'm invisible, a presence felt but not seen. At night, when shadows grow long and deep, I can manifest more fully, walking the thermal basins like I did in life. The missing people were freed. Eddie and the others at the bottom of Grand Prismatic simply stopped. Their bodies floated to the surface, where they were found and given proper burials. The tourists who had lost their shadows recovered completely, though they never remembered exactly what had happened to them. The shadow realm is contained. The barrier holds. Every night, I walk the boundaries, ensuring that the two worlds remain separate. Sometimes I encounter other shadows, fragments of the old Guardian's power, but they pose no threat. They know who I am now. They know I'm in charge. But the job is lonely, terribly, utterly lonely. I watch tourists visit the thermal features, laughing and taking pictures, completely unaware of the darkness that lurks just beneath the surface. I watch Jim train new rangers, teaching them about thermal safety, but never mentioning the real dangers. I watch the sun rise and set over Yellowstone, marking time in a life that isn't quite life anymore. Sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice, if there might have been another way. But then I feel the pressure of the shadow realm pressing against our reality, and I know that someone has to stand guard. Someone has to keep the door closed. The work continues. It will always continue. And when I grow too weak to hold the barrier, I'll have to find someone else. Someone with the right kind of eyes, the right kind of courage. Someone willing to sacrifice their humanity to save both worlds. I hope it won't be for many years. I hope I can spare someone else this burden. But if the time comes, if the darkness starts to seep through again, I'll do what I have to do. I'll find a new guardian. I'll pass on the responsibility, because that's what guardians do. We sacrifice ourselves so others can live in the light. Sometimes, late at night, I stand at the edge of Grand Prismatic and remember, My name is Tony Sandoval, and I've been a park ranger in Death Valley for 14 years. I've seen people die out here in ways that would make your stomach turn. The desert doesn't care if you're young or old, smart or stupid. It just takes what it wants. But what I found in August of 1992 was different. It was wrong in ways that still keep me awake at night. I was checking on the Badwater Basin area when the call came in. 3 college kids from UC Berkeley hadn't shown up for their planned check-in. Geology students, the kind who know better than to mess around in Death Valley during a heat wave. The temperature was pushing 128 degrees, hot enough to cook an egg on the rocks. I found their campsite first. Everything was still set up perfectly. Tents, water jugs, even their breakfast half-eaten. But no students. Their car was still there, keys on the dashboard. Nobody runs off into the desert without their car. Not in this heat. Then I saw the bodies. They were about 50 yards from camp, sitting in a perfect circle like they'd been having a conversation. But they weren't talking anymore. They weren't anything anymore. I've been a medic since the Gulf War. I've seen dehydration, heat stroke, every kind of desert death you can imagine. But these kids, they looked like they'd been buried in sand for 100 years. Their skin was dark leather stretched over bones. Their eyes were gone, just empty holes staring at nothing. The weird part? They still had water. Full bottles right next to each mummified body. Clean, cold water that they never drank. I called it in on the radio, my hands shaking. "Base, this is Sandoval. I need the coroner out at Badwater Basin. And maybe somebody who knows about weird stuff." "Weird stuff, Tony?" "These kids are dead, but they look like they've been dead for 50 years. And they didn't run out of water." The silence on the audio lasted forever. Finally, "Copy that. Stay with the scene." I set up my portable shade and waited. The sun was like a hammer hitting my skull, but I've learned to deal with it. What I couldn't deal with was the smell. Not the normal smell of death. This was different. Dry. Ancient. Like opening a tomb. While I waited, I walked around the campsite. The sand around the bodies was strange. It looked drained. Like something had sucked all the life out of it. Even the rocks looked wrong, more cracked than they should be. I've saved 73 people from heat death in my time here. I know what the desert does to a human body. First you get confused, then you stop sweating, then your organs start shutting down. It takes hours, sometimes days. These kids had been turned into mummies in one night. The coroner arrived 2 hours later, Dr. Martinez from the county office. She took one look at the bodies and called her supervisor. Then she called the state police. Then she called some people I didn't recognize. "Tony," she said, pulling me aside, "in 30 years of medical work, I've never seen anything like this. Natural causes?" "Natural." She laughed, but it wasn't funny. Their bodies lost every drop of water they had, but not through sweating or breathing. It's like something sucked it right out of them. I helped her examine the bodies. Their skin felt like old leather, but underneath you could feel that they were perfectly preserved. No decay, no insects, nothing. Just dried out like jerky. "The lab work is going to be interesting," Dr. Martinez said. "But Tony, don't let anyone else camp in this area until we figure out what happened." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those empty eye sockets, the way the bodies sat in that perfect circle, like they'd been arranged by someone who cared about making it look right. I got up around midnight, and drove back to the campsite. I know it was stupid, but I needed to see it again, to make sure it was real. The moon was full, turning the salt flats silver. I parked 100 yards away and walked to where the bodies had been. The coroner had taken them, but you could still see the marks in the sand where they'd sat. That's when I saw the footprints. They weren't human footprints. Too long, too narrow. And they led away from the campsite toward the old mining caves in the rocks. But here's the thing that made my blood turn cold. The footprints were filled with sand so fine it looked like powder, like whoever made them was so dry they were falling apart as they walked. I followed the tracks for about 50 yards before I heard it. A sound like wind through dry leaves, but there was no wind. It was coming from the caves. I had my flashlight, my radio, my service weapon. 14 years of ranger training. But something deep in my gut was screaming at me to run. Every instinct I'd developed in the war, every survival skill I'd learned in the desert was telling me to get away from those caves. I made it maybe 10 more steps before I saw the eyes. 2 yellow dots in the darkness of the cave entrance, not reflecting my flashlight, glowing on their own. And they were watching me. I ran back to my truck like a scared kid, my heart hammering against my ribs. When I looked back, the eyes were gone, but I could still feel them watching me. The next morning, I filed a report about the strange footprints. I didn't mention the eyes. Who would believe that? But I knew something was hunting in Death Valley. Something that could drain the life out of 3 healthy college students in one night. Something that lived in the caves and came out when the desert was hot enough to kill. I just didn't know it was only getting started. 3 days later, another group went missing. This time, it was a family from Phoenix, mom, dad, and their teenage son. They'd been camping at the same spot where the college kids died. I'd put up warning signs, but people don't always listen. I found them the same way. Perfect circle, completely mummified, full water bottles beside each body. The parents were holding hands, but this time, something was different. The boy was gone. I searched for hours, calling his name until my voice gave out. Found his tracks leading toward the caves, but they disappeared into the rocks. By the time backup arrived, the sun was setting, and nobody wanted to search those caves in the dark. We went in the next morning with floodlights and enough backup to handle anything human. The caves went deeper than any of us expected, branching out into a maze of tunnels that had been carved by flash floods over thousands of years. About a quarter-mile in, we found him. The boy was sitting against a wall, same mummified condition as the others, but his eyes were open, and they were looking at us. "Jesus Christ," whispered Officer Kelly, the youngest cop on the team. "Is he—" "He's preserved," I said, kneeling down. The boy's skin felt like old leather, but when I touched his wrist, I could feel the faintest pulse. "He's still alive." We tried to move him, but he was too fragile. Every time we lifted him, pieces of his skin flaked off like old paper. He couldn't talk, couldn't move, but his eyes followed us around the cave. Dr. Martinez arrived with a portable IV unit. "If we can get fluids back into him." She inserted the IV needle into his arm. The saline solution went in, but nothing changed. It was like pouring water into sand. The boy's body absorbed it, but he didn't get any better. "More," he whispered. His voice sounded like wind through dry grass. "Need more." We ran 4 bags of saline into him. Nothing. His body just soaked it up and stayed the same. Dr. Martinez was crying by the time we gave up. "I've never seen anything like this," she said. "It's like his body became a sponge. He can't process water anymore." The boy died that afternoon. Just closed his eyes and stopped breathing. But before he died, he said something that still haunts me. "It's so thirsty. It's been thirsty for so long." That night, I couldn't stand it anymore. I drove back to the caves with a cooler full of water and every flashlight I owned. I was going to find whatever was doing this and end it. The cave entrance was bigger than I remembered. The rocks seemed to have shifted, making a wider opening. My flashlight beam couldn't reach the back wall. I made it maybe 50 feet inside when I heard footsteps. Not human footsteps, something dragging across the stone floor. The sound echoed off the cave walls, making it impossible to tell where it was coming from. Then I smelled it. That same dry, ancient smell from the campsite, but stronger now. Like being locked in a tomb. I turned around to leave, and that's when I saw it. The thing was standing in the cave entrance, blocking my way out. It had been human once, maybe a long time ago, but now it was just dried skin stretched over bones, like the mummies in old movies. Except this one was standing up. It was tall, maybe 7 feet, with arms that hung down to its knees. Its fingers were too long, ending in what looked like claws. But the worst part was its face. The skin had pulled back from its skull, showing yellowed teeth and a permanent grin. And its eyes. Its eyes were glowing yellow, like two candles in the dark. "Water," it said. Its voice was like sandpaper on stone. "You have water." I was holding a bottle in my left hand. The thing's eyes locked onto it like a starving man looking at food. "You can have it," I said, setting the bottle on the ground. "Just let me go." The thing moved toward the water bottle, but not like a human would. It flowed across the cave floor like liquid, like it was melting and reforming with each step. When it reached the bottle, it picked it up with those long fingers and held it up to the light. "Not enough," it said. "Never enough." Then it looked at me, and I understood. The water wasn't what it wanted. I was. I ran deeper into the cave, my flashlight beam bouncing off the walls. Behind me I could hear that dragging sound getting closer. The cave branched off in different directions, and I took the first tunnel I found. The tunnel sloped downward, and the air got cooler. I could hear water dripping somewhere ahead. Real water, not the dry whisper of the thing chasing me. I found an underground spring, clear water bubbling up from somewhere deep in the earth. I knelt down and splashed it on my face, filled my water bottles. The water tasted clean and cold, like it had been filtered through miles of rock. That's when I realized where I was. This was the thing's home, the place it came back to when it needed to hide from the sun. And all around the spring, arranged in neat rows like some kind of museum, were dozens of mummified bodies. Men, women, children. Some looked recent, others like they'd been there for years. All of them perfectly preserved, all of them sitting up like they were waiting for something. And some of them were still alive. Their eyes followed me as I moved through the cave. They couldn't speak, couldn't move, but they were aware, trapped in their dried-out bodies, probably for years. I heard the dragging sound getting closer. The thing had found me. I grabbed my radio, praying I was close enough to the surface to get a signal. "Base, this is Sandoval. I'm in the caves below Badwater Basin. Send help. Send everyone." Static. Then, "Tony, you're breaking up. What's your location?" "The caves. There's something down here, something that's been killing people. I found the bodies. Jesus, there are dozens of them." The signal cut out. I was on my own. I could see the glow of yellow eyes in the tunnel entrance. The thing was coming, and there was nowhere left to run. But I had the spring, and I had an idea. I waited until the thing was almost on top of it. F me. Then I acted. I grabbed the biggest water bottle I had and threw it as hard as I could at the creature's chest. The plastic bottle exploded against its dried skin, soaking it with water. The thing screamed, a sound like breaking glass, and stumbled backward. Where the water hit, its skin started to change. The leather-like surface became soft, almost human, but only for a second. Then it dried out again, even more cracked than before. I threw another bottle, then another. Each one made the thing scream and retreat a little further, but the water wasn't enough. It was like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom. "More," the thing whispered, reaching toward me with those long fingers. "Give me more." I backed up against the spring, my last bottle in my hand. The mummified bodies around me watched with their empty eyes. Some of them were moving their mouths, trying to speak, but no sound came out. That's when I heard the helicopters. The cavalry had arrived, but they were too late. The thing grabbed my wrist with one of its claws, and I felt something terrible happen. The moisture started draining out of my arm, leaving the skin tight and painful. I could actually feel my blood getting thicker, my muscles cramping up. I fell to my knees, but I managed to twist the cap off my last water bottle and pour it over the thing's hand. It let go with another scream, and I crawled away from the spring. The helicopters were getting closer. I could hear voices echoing down the cave tunnels, but I was getting weaker. My tongue felt like sandpaper, and my vision was starting to blur. I looked back at the spring and saw something that made my blood freeze. The thing wasn't retreating anymore. It was drinking from the water source, and as it drank, it was getting bigger, stronger. "Tony!" a voice called from the tunnel. "Where are you?" "Stay back!" I yelled, but my voice was barely a whisper. "Don't come down here!" Too late. 3 search and rescue guys came around the corner with their lights and equipment. They saw the mummified bodies and stopped. Dead. "What the hell?" one of them said. The thing turned away from the spring, water dripping from its mouth. It looked at the rescue team like a kid looking at birthday presents. "Run," I croaked. "Get out of here now." But they were trained to help people, not to run from monsters. They started toward me, and the thing moved faster than anything that dried out should have been able to move. It got the first guy before he could even scream, grabbed him by the throat and lifted him off the ground. I watched the life drain out of him in seconds, his skin turning brown and leathery while his eyes went wide with terror. The other 2 guys opened fire. Their bullets hit the thing, but they just punched through its dried skin like it was paper. No blood, no pain, just holes that closed up after a few seconds. The thing dropped the first guy's mummified body and went after the others. I tried to get up, tried to help, but my legs wouldn't work. The dehydration was spreading through my whole body. In 30 seconds it was over. 3 more perfect mummies arranged by the spring. But these ones were still moving, still trying to breathe. The thing looked at me and smiled, actually smiled, like it was happy about something. "Now you understand," it said. "The thirst, it never ends." It walked over to me, those long fingers reaching out. I could smell the ancient dryness coming off its skin. This was it. This was how I was going to die. But then I heard something that changed everything. More voices, a lot more voices, and they were getting closer. "Tony!" It was Dr. Martinez. "We're coming down!" The thing's head snapped toward the tunnel entrance. For the first time, it looked worried. "Too many," it whispered. "Too many to take." It moved toward the tunnel, but I managed to grab its leg. My hand went right through its dried skin, but I held on. "Where did you come from?" And I gasped. "What are you?" It looked down at me with those glowing eyes. "I was like you once. Thirsty. Always thirsty. Found a way to never be thirsty again." "How?" "Made a deal. In the deep places, when the sun was hottest, made a deal with the desert itself." I could hear Dr. Martinez and her team getting closer. The thing could hear them too. "You'll understand soon," it said. "When the thirst takes you. When you're like me." Then it did something I'll never forget. It reached down and touched my forehead with one finger. The touch was like fire, like having the life burned right out of me. But it also showed me something. I saw the thing when it had been human. A prospector, maybe 100 years ago, lost in the desert, dying of thirst. He'd found something down here in the caves, something old and hungry, and he'd made a bargain. Eternal life, but only if he fed it. Brought it water, brought it life. The vision ended, and the thing was gone. Vanished into the shadows like smoke. Dr. Martinez found me a few minutes later, barely conscious and severely dehydrated. They got me to the hospital, pumped me full of fluids, and saved my life. But I was changed. My kidneys were damaged, my blood was thick, and I had this constant thirst that never went away. No matter how much water I drank, it was never enough. The official report said the rescue team died of heat exhaustion, equipment failure. The bodies they found in the cave were attributed to flash flooding over the years, dragging victims into the underground system. But I knew the truth. And I knew the thing was still down there, waiting. 3 more people went missing that month, then 5 more. All found in the same condition, all arranged in neat circles like they were having a conversation. And every time I could feel the thing watching me, waiting for me to get thirsty enough to make the same deal it had made. The final confrontation came in September, when the thing made its biggest mistake. It took Maria. My wife had come to bring me lunch while I was working late, updating the incident RAW, ePorts. She never made it to the ranger station. I found her car on the road to Badwater Basin, keys still in the ignition, her purse on the passenger seat. This time, I didn't call for backup. This time, it was personal. I loaded my truck with every piece of medical equipment I could find. IV bags, cooling blankets, portable pumps, everything. If the thing wanted water, I'd give it more water than it could handle. The caves were different now. The entrance had grown wider, and I could feel cool air flowing out. The thing had been busy expanding its lair, getting ready for something big. I found Maria at the spring sitting with the other mummies, but she wasn't dried out yet. The thing was keeping her fresh, using her as bait. "Tony," she whispered when she saw me. "Don't come any closer. It's here." "I know," I said, setting down my equipment. "I came to make a deal." The thing stepped out of the shadows, taller than I remembered. It had been feeding well, growing stronger. "You understand now," it said. "The thirst. It's in you too." It was right. The constant dehydration, the way water never seemed to help anymore. The thing had marked me that night it touched my forehead. I was changing, becoming like it. "I'll take her place," I said. "Let Maria go, and I'll stay." The thing considered this. "You would make a good servant, but she has more life in her, more water." "Look at me," I said, holding out my hands. The skin was starting to crack, showing the first signs of the mummification process. "I'm already changing. I'm already becoming what you need." The thing moved closer, interested. "Yes, I can smell it on you. The dry death." It started. That's when I triggered the medical equipment I'd hidden around the cave. Portable pumps designed for heat stroke victims, modified to spray water at high pressure. IV bags rigged to burst and flood the area. Everything I'd learned about emergency medicine turned into a weapon. The cave filled with water, gallons of it hitting the thing from every direction. It screamed as its dried skin began to soften and dissolve. But it didn't die. It just got angry. "You cannot kill me," it roared. "I am eternal. I am the desert." It was right. The water was hurting it, but not destroying it. I needed something more. I grabbed Maria and pulled her toward the spring. "The water source," I said. "If I can flood the whole cave system." The thing realized what I was planning. It moved to stop me, but I had one more trick. I'd brought explosives. Not much, just enough to crack the rock around the spring and let the underground water flow freely. It was a desperate plan, but it was all I had. The thing grabbed me just as I set off the charges. The cave shook, and water began pouring from cracks in the walls. But the thing's touch was draining the life out of me faster than I could work. "You will join me," it whispered. "You will be my servant forever." I could feel myself changing, my skin drying out, my thoughts becoming slow and distant. But I held on long enough to see the water level rising, flooding the cave, washing away the carefully arranged mummies. The thing let go of me and tried to escape, but there was too much water. It was dissolving, its dried skin coming apart like old paper. But even as it died, it was laughing. "Too late," it said. "The change has started. You will become what I was." The water reached my chest and I felt myself losing consciousness. The last thing I saw was the thing falling apart, its yellow eyes finally going dark. I woke up in the hospital 3 days later. Maria was there, worried but alive. The doctors said I'd suffered severe dehydration and hypothermia, but I was going to recover. The official report said there had been a flash flood in the cave system. The bodies we found were attributed to historical mining accidents and natural preservation due to the dry climate. Nobody mentioned the thing, and I didn't try to explain it. But I was changed. Not just physically, though the kidney damage was permanent. I could feel something different in my blood, something that made me always thirsty, always aware of the water in other people's bodies. The thing had been right. The process had started. I was becoming something like it had been. But I fought it. Every day, I fought it. I drank more water than any human should need, took medication to keep my kidneys working, and monitored my body for signs of the mummification process. And I watched the desert, because I knew the thing hadn't been the only one. There were other caves, other springs, other places where desperate people might make deals with forces they didn't understand. I became an expert in desert survival and emergency medicine. I trained other rangers to recognize the signs of supernatural dehydration. I developed protocols for dealing with unusual mummy discoveries, all of it disguised as regular safety training. 6 months later, I found another case. A hiker mummified near a different cave system, water bottles untouched. I went in alone and found a creature similar to the one I'd fought, but smaller, newer. This time, I was ready. I flooded the cave and destroyed it before it could claim more victims. But I knew there would be others. The desert is vast, and it's full of desperate people. People who might trade their humanity for survival, not understanding the price they'd pay. I keep working, keep fighting, keep watching. My wife worries about my health, about the way I can never seem to drink enough water. But she doesn't know about the dreams, about the way I can sometimes sense water in living things. The thing was right about one thing. The thirst never ends. Every day, I have to choose to stay human, to resist the call of the deep places where the desert stores its secrets, because I know what's waiting down there. I know what I could becca, if I let the thirst win. But I also know what I've saved. Every person I've taught about desert safety, every hiker I've guided to safety, every life I've protected from the things that hunt in the deepest, driest places. The desert is still dangerous. It still kills people who aren't careful. But now I know it's not just the heat and the emptiness you have to worry about. Sometimes, late at night, I drive out to Badwater Basin and look at the stars. The cave system is still flooded, still sealed, but I can feel something stirring down there, something patient and eternal. The desert remembers, and it's always thirsty. My name is Tony Sandoval, and I'm still a ranger in Death Valley. I save lives, I protect people, and I watch for signs of the things that shouldn't exist, because somebody has to, and because I know what happens when nobody's watching. The thirst never ends, but neither does the fight against it. My name is David Stormwind, and I've been a park ranger at Glacier National Park for 27 years. Folks call me Dave. I've pulled 156 people off these mountains, some alive, some not. I know every trail, every rock face, every place where the weather can turn deadly in minutes. What I'm about to tell you happened in September of 1969, just before I was planning to retire. I never believed in spirits or anything that could control the weather. I'm a practical man. Been through a war, lost my wife 2 years back, raised kids who now live in cities far from here. The mountains were my life, my job, my everything. I thought I understood them. The morning it all started, I was at the ranger station reviewing weather reports. Perfect conditions, clear skies, light winds, temperatures in the 60s down at the lake. A dream day for climbing. That's when the call came in. Dave, we got a problem. It was Tom Bradley, my supervisor. The Morrison climbing team hasn't checked in. They were supposed to radio from the summit yesterday evening. The Morrison team, 4 expert climbers from California. They'd been planning this trip for months, wanted to tackle the north face of Mount Cleveland. These weren't weekend warriors. Jack Morrison had been climbing for 20 years. His team knew what they were doing. I grabbed my gear and headed up Going to the Sun Road in my truck. The radio crackled as I drove. Ranger Stormwind, this is Base Camp. We found their last radio transmission recorded on our emergency backup. You need to hear this. The voice that came through was Jack Morrison, but it was wrong. Panicked. Base Camp, we need immediate evacuation. There's a storm up here, impossible storm. Wind like a freight train, temperature dropping fast. We can't see 5 feet. This wasn't in any forecast. How did you miss this? Static. Then, oh God, what is that sound? That howling, it's not wind. It's not... Sarah, stay with the group. Don't... The transmission cut to nothing. I pulled over and checked my instruments. Barometric pressure was steady. Wind speed, 5 miles per hour. Temperature, 62 degrees. I radioed the weather station in Kalispell. No storms reported anywhere in the region, came the reply. Conditions are ideal throughout the park. But 4 experienced climbers were dead or missing, and their last words described a storm that didn't exist. I reached the base camp 2 hours later. The support team was packing up, faces grim. We watched the whole thing through binoculars, said Pete Kowalski, the team's photographer. Clear skies everywhere. Then suddenly there's this cloud right around the summit. Dark, spinning, like a tornado made of snow. It was there for maybe 10 minutes, then gone. I studied the mountain through my scope. Perfect visibility. No clouds, no wind. Nothing. Show me exactly where you saw this cloud, I said. Pete pointed to the northeast face just below the summit. Right there. But Dave, here's the thing. It was only around that peak. Everywhere else was clear. I've never seen weather like that. I'd been predicting mountain weather for almost 3 decades. I knew every pattern, every sign, every way the sky could kill you up here. What Pete described was impossible. But impossible or not, I had people to find. The next morning, I started up the mountain with a search team. We followed the climbing route the Morrison team had planned, looking for any sign of what happened. The weather was still perfect, the kind of day that makes you feel like you could climb forever. We found the first piece of evidence at 8,000 feet, a climbing rope cut clean through, hanging from a rock face. The end was frozen solid, covered in ice despite the warm temperature. When I touched it, the ice burns, had my fingers through my gloves. "Dave," called out Martinez, one of my younger rangers, "you need to see this." 50 yards away, scattered across the rocks, were pieces of climbing gear, crampons, carabiners, a sleeping bag, all of it covered in the same impossible ice. And the pattern was wrong. The gear was spread out like it had been dropped from a great height, but the team had been climbing up, not across. I knelt beside a frozen water bottle and tried to make sense of it. The ice was thick, the kind you'd see after days of below-zero weather. But it was 70 degrees at this elevation. I scraped some ice into a sample bag, watched it melt instantly in the warm air. "How high up were they when they radioed?" I asked Martinez. "According to their plan, they should have been near the summit, maybe 2,200 feet. I looked up at the peak, still 2,000 feet above us. If their gear had fallen from there, how did it end up spread across such a wide area? And why was everything frozen? We climbed higher. At 9,000 feet, we found Sarah Chen's backpack, ripped open, contents scattered. Her camera was smashed, but the film was intact. I pocketed it, hoping it might show us what happened. That's when I heard it for the first time. A howl echoed across the mountain, low and long, like no animal I'd ever heard. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, bouncing off the rock faces, growing louder instead of fading. The sound went right through me, made my bones ache. "What the hell was that?" Martinez whispered. I'd heard wolves, bears, mountain lions. This was different, bigger, and it sounded almost intelligent. The howl came again, and this time I felt the mountain shake. Just slightly, but enough to make loose rocks skitter down the cliff face. Then the temperature dropped. Not gradually, instantly. One moment I was warm in my light jacket. The next I was shivering in air that felt like winter. "We need to get down," I said. "Now!" But as we started to descend, the howl came a third time, and with it came the wind. Hurricane-force gusts that came from nowhere, slamming into us like a physical blow. I watched Martinez get lifted off his feet and thrown against a rock wall. The wind screamed past us for 30 seconds, then stopped as suddenly as it had started. The temperature jumped back to normal. The air was calm, but Martinez was bleeding from a head wound, and we were all shaking. "Dave," he said, touching his forehead, "that wasn't natural. Wind doesn't just appear like that." I helped him to his feet, mind racing. In 27 years on these mountains, I'd never seen anything like it. Weather didn't work that way. It built up gradually, had patterns, followed rules. This was something else, something that could create storms on command. As we made our way down the mountain, I developed the film from Sarah's camera. The first few shots were normal, the team setting up camp, starting their climb, smiling at the camera. Then the pictures changed. The sky in the background started to darken. Clouds appeared between shots, growing thicker and more threatening. In the final pictures, the team looked terrified. They were pointing at something above them, but the camera angle only showed swirling snow and darkness. The last photo was just white. Complete whiteout conditions. But in the corner of the frame, barely visible, was something else. A shape in the snow. Tall, massive, moving against the storm instead of with it. I stared at that photo for a long time, trying to convince myself it was just shadows and snow playing tricks. But deep down, I knew better. Something was up there on the mountain. Something that controlled the weather like a weapon. Something that had killed 4 experienced climbers in perfect conditions. Over the next 3 days, it happened again and again. A solo climber named Robert Hayes vanished on Mount Gould. Perfect weather, experienced mountaineer, disappeared without a trace. And the only evidence was his radio transmission. "Base camp, there's a storm coming in fast. How did you miss this? The wind is incredible, and there's something in the clouds, something big." Then silence. 2 days later, a father and son team disappeared on Glacier Peak. Same story. Clear skies, sudden storm, panicked radio calls about impossible weather. We found their bodies at the bottom of a cliff, frozen solid in 60-degree temperatures. The pattern was clear now. Something was hunting climbers on the high peaks, something that could create deadly weather out of nothing. I started spending my nights in the weather station, studying barometric readings, wind patterns, anything that might explain what was happening. The instruments showed nothing unusual, perfect conditions, day after day, but people kept dying in storms that didn't exist. On the 4th night, I was alone in the station when I heard it again, that howl echoing across the valley. But this time it was closer, much closer. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside. The night was clear, stars bright overhead. But the howl came again, and with it came the cold. The temperature plummeted, and I could see my breath in the suddenly frigid air. Then I saw it. A shape moving across the ridge above the station. Massive, at least 12 feet tall, moving on 2 legs, but with the fluid grace of something perfectly adapted to the mountain terrain. It was covered in white fur, almost invisible against the snow, but I could see its eyes. Intelligent eyes that seemed to be looking right at me. It opened its mouth and howled again. The sound was so loud it triggered an avalanche on the far side of the valley. And with the howl came the wind, not the random gusts of a storm, but directed, purposeful, aimed right at me. I was knocked flat, pinned against the station wall by wind that felt like it was trying to tear me apart. The temperature dropped so fast that ice began forming on my jacket. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't do anything but stare at the creature as it watched me struggle. Hen, as suddenly as it had started, the wind stopped. The temperature returned to normal. The creature turned and disappeared into the darkness, moving across terrain that should have been impossible to navigate in the dark. I stayed pressed against the wall for 10 minutes, heart pounding, trying to process what I'd seen. 27 years in these mountains, and I'd never encountered anything like it. This wasn't just an animal. It was something that could control the weather, create storms, kill with wind and cold. And it was intelligent. The way it had looked at me, the way it had stopped just short of killing me, it was sending a message. This was its territory, and humans weren't welcome. But I had a job to do. People were dying, and I was the only one who knew the truth. The next morning I drove to the Blackfeet Reservation to speak with Joseph Running Bear, an elder I'd known for years. If anyone would know about creatures that controlled mountain weather, it would be him. Joseph listened to my story without interruption, nodding occasionally. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. "You've seen the storm caller," he said finally. "My grandfather told me stories. The whites call it different names, but we know what it is. Guardian of the high places, protector of the sacred peaks." Sacred peaks? The highest mountains have always been holy to our people, places where the spirits dwell. The storm caller has guarded them for centuries, keeping people away from places they shouldn't go. I thought about the pattern of attacks, all on the highest peaks, all in areas that would be considered sacred. How do you fight something like that? Joseph shook his head. You don't fight it, you respect it. Show it that you understand its purpose, but if you must face it. He paused. It's bound to the high places. Below the tree line, it has no power. And the storms it creates drain its strength. But Dave, listen to me. This creature has been here longer than our people. It's not evil. It's just protecting what it thinks is sacred. That night, made my decision. I couldn't keep letting people die. I had to go up there and confront it directly. Try to find some way to coexist, to protect both the climbers and whatever it was guarding. I spent the next day preparing. Cold weather gear, emergency supplies, everything I'd need for a high-altitude encounter. I left a letter for my supervisor, explaining what I'd found and what I was going to do. If I didn't come back, at least someone would know the truth. I started up Mount Cleveland before dawn, alone. The weather was perfect again. Clear skies, light winds, the kind of conditions that had fooled so many climbers before me. But I knew better now. Perfect weather meant nothing when the storm caller was watching. I climbed steadily, following the route the Morrison team had taken. At 8,000 feet, I could feel eyes on me. The creature was up there somewhere, deciding whether I was a threat. I kept climbing. At 9,500 feet, the howl began, long, low, echoing off the peaks. But this time, I was ready for it. I'd brought military-grade cold weather gear, oxygen, everything I'd need to survive a supernatural blizzard. The temperature dropped like a stone. The wind hit me like a physical blow, trying to knock me off the mountain. But I'd been through alpine warfare training in Italy during the war. I knew how to climb in impossible conditions. I pressed on, using ice axes and crampons to fight my way up through wind that should have been impossible. The storm was so intense I could barely see my own hands, but I kept climbing. Whatever was up there, I was going to face it. The howl came again, closer now, and I could hear something else in it. Not just anger or territorial warning. There was something almost lonely about it. Like a creature that had been guarding these peaks for so long it had forgotten what it was like to have company. At 10,200 feet, the storm suddenly stopped. The wind died, the temperature returned to normal, and I found myself in a small, circular valley I'd never seen before. Ancient stone cairns marked the perimeter, and in the center was a natural amphitheater carved from the rock. The storm caller was waiting for me. Up close, it was even more magnificent than I'd imagined. 12 feet tall, covered in thick white fur, with the build of something perfectly adapted to life at extreme altitude. Its eyes were pale blue, ancient and intelligent. It sat on a throne-like rock formation, watching me with what looked like curiosity. "I know what you are," I said, my voice echoing in the thin air. Joseph Running Bear told me, "You're the guardian of the sacred peaks." The creature tilted its head, studying me. When it spoke, its voice was like distant thunder. "You are the one who protects the lower places, the one who brings the lost ones home." I was so shocked I nearly fell over. It could talk. "You speak English?" "I speak the language of mountains, of wind and snow and stone. Your words are just sounds the wind makes." It stood up, towering over me. "But I understand your purpose. You protect as I protect. We are not so different." "Then why are you killing climbers?" The creature's eyes flashed. "They come to the sacred places. They leave their marks, their trash, their noise. They disturb the balance. The mountains are not for humans to conquer." I understood now. This wasn't just about territory. It was about respect, about treating the mountains as something sacred instead of something to be conquered. What if I could keep them away? What if I could protect the sacred peaks without you having to kill anyone? The Stormcaller considered this. "You would do this? Turn your own kind away from the high places?" "If it means they don't have to die, yes." The creature studied me for a long moment. Then it raised its arms, and I felt the power it commanded. The air around us shimmered with energy, and I could sense the vast weather systems it could control. This was something ancient, something that had been part of these mountains since long before humans arrived. You will keep them from the 3 highest peaks, it said, the places where the spirits dwell. In return, I will not hunt in the lower places, but if they come to the sacred peaks, I will protect them as I have always protected them. And if someone gets lost up here, if they end up in the sacred areas by accident, the creature's expression softened slightly. Then I will call you. You will come, and you will guide them away. But you must come alone. No others may enter the sacred places. I nodded. It was a bargain I could live with. How will I know when you're calling? The Stormcaller smiled, showing teeth like icicles. You will know. It raised its arms again, and the wind began to swirl around us. But this time it wasn't threatening. It was almost gentle, like a blessing. The creature stepped back into the swirling snow and began to fade. Remember, guardian of the lower places, its voice echoed as it disappeared. The mountains were here long before your kind, and they will be here long after. Treat them with respect, and they will treat you with respect. Then it was gone, leaving me alone in the stone amphitheater. The storm had passed, and the sun was shining on the peaks around me. But I could still feel its presence, watching, waiting, protecting the sacred places. I began the long climb down, my mind already working on how to keep people away from the highest peaks without telling them why. Some truths were too dangerous to share. That was 3 months ago. I never did retire. How could I? I had a new job now, one that went beyond just being a park ranger. I was the liaison between the human world and something ancient and powerful that most people would never understand. I've quietly made sure that the 3 highest peaks are off limits to climbers. Dangerous conditions, I tell them. Unstable snow, sudden weather changes, too risky for civilian climbing. Most people accept it. The few who don't, well, I find ways to convince them. The Stormcaller has kept its word. No more mysterious weather deaths, no more impossible storms. But I know it's still up there, watching, waiting. Sometimes on clear nights I can hear it howling in the distance, a sound that no longer frightens me but instead reminds me of the bargain we made. I've also started working more closely with the Blackfeet Nation, learning about the spiritual significance of the mountains. Joseph Running Bear has become a valuable advisor, helping me understand which areas are truly sacred and which are just wilderness. The official reports list the climbing deaths as weather-related accidents, sudden storms, temperature drops, human error. The families of the victims have closure, and the truth stays buried where it belongs. Some secrets are too dangerous for the world to know. But I know the truth. I know that these mountains are protected by something ancient and powerful, something that sees the peaks as sacred rather than conquerable. And I know that as long as I keep people away from the highest places, the Stormcaller will keep the peace. Sometimes I wonder if I'm the only one who knows. But then I remember the look in the creature's eyes, the loneliness I heard in its howl. I think it's been waiting for someone like me for a very long time, someone who understands that some places are meant to be protected, not explored. The mountains are quiet now, peaceful. But I know that peace comes with a price, and I'm willing to pay it. Because I've seen what happens when the Stormcaller feels threatened, and I never want to see it again. My name is David Stormwind, and I'm the guardian of the lower places. And somewhere up in the sacred peaks, the Stormcaller continues its ANSI, Ent Vigil, protecting the high places from those who would disturb their peace. The mountains remember everything, and now so do I.